He is the most absurd emperor I have ever seen. For the sake of a scheming woman he had just met, he actually married a new imperial consort on the very day of the first anniversary celebration with the empress. And the empress was no saint either. Not only did she not get angry, she even personally celebrated the new couple. The empress was named Yvonne, the only daughter whom Drull treasured like a jewel. Yet on the very day of the first anniversary celebration between the empress and the emperor not only danced with another noble lady, but also publicly married a new imperial consort. On the very day Carloy and Yvonne were married a year ago, the duke and the empress joined hands to put on quite a show. He clearly knew that the emperor could never truly treat his daughter well. Yet even so, he still did not hesitate to use her. Hans Drull was exactly the kind of man as poisonous as a viper. I did not hate this man from the very beginning, but with wealth and power not inferior to the royal family, he not only caused the deaths of countless royal family members, but also made the king lose his dearest kin. Then the king took the empress's hand and said, "We finally meet. Your eyes really look a lot like your father's." Even that arrogant expression is the very image of Duke Drull. Who would have thought that when faced with the king's words, the empress merely nodded coldly, looking into her eyes. The king could not help but think of the past. Then the king suddenly turned around and insisted on leaving the wedding. Just as the duke was about to do something, the empress suddenly stopped him and said, "I will properly guide his majesty." But that sentence happened to be overheard by the nobles, and before long, it reached the king's ears. He clenched his teeth. Time moved to after the first wedding anniversary banquet. Today was supposed to be the day when the king and the empress dined together. But the king brought a new imperial consort, wanting the empress to voluntarily give up her place. She is the most pitiful girl I have ever seen. Just because of her father's selfish desires, she had to marry an emperor she did not love. Even at the wedding itself, she was heartlessly abandoned by him. Yet she still made up her mind in front of her father and said that she would properly guide his majesty. And because of this news, the king also took the initiative to meet the empress. With a face full of confusion, he said, "Do you know that I hate Drull and even want your whole family to be utterly destroyed?" After hearing that, the empress merely nodded lightly. Then she said calmly, "Can you do it? I am asking you. Can you destroy our family? If not, then having a child with me would not be a bad idea. Even if we do not have a child, we can still appropriately pretend to be a loving couple. My proposal has every benefit and no harm for your majesty." But after hearing that, the king merely smiled faintly. "If you dare to behave recklessly and I catch you, be prepared to lose your head." Before leaving, he did not forget to add, "Although you can sit in the position of empress of this country, that is all." After that, the relationship between the two became increasingly strained. Even on the day when he had previously agreed to dine with the empress, the king brought the consort with him and wanted the empress to give up her seat. But in the empress's eyes, Miss Roden did not yet qualify as an imperial consort. His Majesty suddenly said he wanted to confer the title on Miss Roden, so the ministers are hurrying to handle the matter. And this time it also involves restoring a system that had been abolished for many years, so naturally it requires even more time. Miss Roden, I am not doing this to target you. I am only worried that it may damage His Majesty's reputation. Then Roden suddenly spoke. What Her Majesty the Empress says is absolutely right. I was the one who was rude first, and I ask Her Majesty to forgive my discourtesy. Even the Emperor at her side, after hearing that, also expressed his apology for what he had done. But in the king's view, he could not be blamed for this either. When you were made empress, the duke ignored all etiquette and regulations. I thought conferring the title of imperial consort could be done the same way, so this was also an unintentional mistake on my part. I hope the empress can understand. Also, from now on your affairs will all be handled by Kana. Who would have thought that when the empress asked when she had ever had any affairs to handle, the king seemed to suddenly come back to his senses. I have never paid attention to you, so I did not notice. Seeing this, Kana suddenly suggested, could the matter of conferring the title of imperial consort be entrusted to Her Majesty the Empress? I have heard that Her Majesty the Empress is exceptionally intelligent. If she handles it, perhaps it will be faster than the ministers. As she spoke, she took the king's hand. The knife and fork in the empress's hands fell accordingly. She kept staring at their clasped hands. Even the king felt somewhat uncomfortable under that gaze. It is just holding hands once. Is there really a need to stare like that? And with that heavy look, it was impossible to guess what she was thinking. If the empress handles it personally, it will surely be resolved quickly. After saying that, the king left with Kana. Then the empress watched their departing figures. This is bad. Just as His Majesty said, I married into the palace relying on my father. So when it comes to this kind of matter, I really do not know how to handle it. This truly puts the empress in a difficult position. On the other side, after the king returned, he even questioned Kana about why she had held his hand. But in her view, had not His Majesty always done as he pleased? Then I can do the same, right? After all, ours is only a contractual relationship. The king merely let out a soft sigh. I am not talking about that matter. I am talking about what you said just now. Why did you suddenly push the matter of the conferral onto the empress? Who knows whether she might take the opportunity to do something? And Kana merely wanted to see the empress's reaction. On the contrary, Your Majesty, without even telling me in advance, You brought me to the place where you were dining with Her Majesty the Empress, the one who is always using me in personal matters. Is that not you, Your Majesty? Do you want to see the Empress look jealous?" That remark instead made the king laugh. Do you still not understand the Empress's personality? She is a cold and heartless person. How could she possibly be jealous? But judging from the Empress's reaction just now, it seems she is not entirely without feelings for you either. Instead of always treating her coldly, why not try to win over Her Majesty the Empress and make her your person? Then the king patted her on the shoulder. "Rather than taking the trouble to lure her into becoming my person, I might as well try to seduce a stone. At least I would not be wasting my feelings." Someone like her, who was pampered like a princess from childhood, certainly cannot endure humiliation like today. After all, she is Drell's blood. She cannot be much better. Perhaps if I die one day, she would only say lightly, "Is that so?" and then continue cutting her steak. "By the way, how is the matter I asked you to investigate?" Kana raised her hand and brushed her hair. "All the witnesses to the incident when Your Majesty was kidnapped as a child are already dead. Even the village where you were at the time has become ruins, with not a single person left alive." After the emperor and the empress had been apart for several weeks, the emperor suddenly saw the duke walking around inside the imperial palace from the balcony. That crazy old man. He really treats the palace like his own home. The maid said the duke cried and made a scene, asking how they could treat his precious daughter like this. After hearing that, the king waved his hand. Merely hearing about it made him feel irritated. "Go pass a message to the empress and tell her not to forget what I ordered her to do. Add one more thing. It is rare that I gave her a task, so I hope she will not fail even at such a trivial matter." But the steward suddenly looked troubled. If Her Majesty the Empress gets angry and turns around to tell the duke, that would be terrible. The king suddenly said loudly, "Must I even watch the duke's expression in my own study?" After saying that, he thought of what had happened in his childhood again. "Drell, you damned bastard." Some time had already passed since the king told the steward to deliver the message. Although a reply had been received, it contained only one sentence: "I shall respectfully obey Your Majesty's command." After hearing that, the king suddenly stood up. "I am going to the Empress's palace in person." Who would have thought that inside this palace, people were already talking everywhere? When the king arrived at the Empress's palace, the head maid looked worried. When the king looked inside, he was completely stunned. He was utterly shocked by the scene before him. Then the king strode forward. At this moment, the Empress was still loudly calling for the head attendant, telling her to turn off the lights. Only when the Empress heard the king's voice did she suddenly snap back to her senses. "By the way, what are you doing? Why is your hand bleeding?" Who would have thought that the Empress suddenly shook off his hand? "Why did you come straight here without first having someone announce you? Do you think I want to touch your hand? Even if something has become habitual, there should still be limits. Is the Empress always this overbearing?" "I came because of the matter of conferring the title on the imperial consort. I clearly warned you to deal with it quickly, yet you did nothing." "Empress, do you not think you have gone too far? Even if the duke interferes, this is still the Empress's responsibility. You only need to deal with it decisively. So stop throwing a tantrum and do what you're supposed to do." Who would have thought that the Empress suddenly said, "The one who truly ought to know when to stop is Your Majesty. In Your Majesty's eyes, I am merely an empress who relies on her father and acts arrogantly. Do you not think that is laughable? As the only daughter of a duke of overwhelming power, if I truly acted arrogantly, would it be limited to such petty trouble? I could directly cancel the imperial consort's conferral ceremony, and I could also drive the nameless and titleless Miss Roden out of the palace. I could even ignore Your Majesty and handle all the affairs in the palace however I wished. And yet I have only remained here quietly. Your Majesty, have you ever thought that by doing this, I am actually bringing you nothing but benefits?" Who would have thought that after hearing that, the king let out a cold laugh. "So, everything you have done was for me? That is right. The Empress indeed is not as tyrannical as the Duke. I appreciate your intentions, but if you truly want to do something for me, only one thing is enough, and that is to disappear from before my eyes and never appear again." Looking at you like this, you do not even dare to dissuade your beloved father. Do you? I never expected you to truly do anything for me anyway. You only need to properly handle the imperial consort's conferral ceremony. I do not want to stay in this place for even one more moment. The only thing the king wanted the Empress to do was to completely disappear from his sight. After the emperor left the Empress's palace, he ordered punishment for all the servants there, warning them that such a thing must never happen again. Naturally, that head attendant could no longer remain there. I saw that the Empress's hand was still bleeding, and yet you still had the mind to follow me here. Is this how you serve others? What you should be doing now is staying by the Empress's side, tending to her wound. Is it not? In the Emperor's study a few days later, as expected, as long as the Empress was willing to handle it seriously, things could be resolved smoothly. Who would have thought that the king suddenly noticed the date of the conferral ceremony? That day turned out to be the death anniversary of Duchess Stroll. Since it was arranged by the Empress, let it first be announced according to that date. What exactly are you trying to do, Yvonne? Inside the Empire's council chamber, the king brought up the matter of the imperial consort, but the Duke believed that the Emperor's decision was inappropriate. This is a system that was abolished 200 years ago. If it causes unrest because of this, how will your majesty clean it up then? Moreover, the entire capital is now spreading the rumor that all matters of the royal family will be handled by Miss Roden from now on. Is this not trampling on Her Majesty the Empress's dignity? Who would have thought that after hearing that, the king let out a sneer? Duke, did you not personally say that the Empress has been frail since childhood and that you have always been worried? By having others handle the affairs, I am doing it for the Empress's sake. It so happens that Kana is also entering the palace with the status of imperial consort. So would that not kill two birds with one stone? With two people sharing the duties, I would no longer have to worry so much about the Empress's health. Was not this imperial consort conferral ceremony also entrusted to the Empress? Who would have thought that the Duke suddenly slammed his palm on the table? How could my daughter possibly set the conferral ceremony on her mother's death anniversary? You are clearly trying to humiliate me, an old man. In this way, are you not? But who would have thought that after hearing that, the Emperor's face turned murderous? Duke, have you gone mad? Calling yourself an old man over and over. It seems you really have grown senile. I did not know at all that day was your wife's death anniversary. How many times exactly do I have to say this before you will let it go? After saying that, the king suddenly stood up. That is all for today. That crazy old man. I truly do not want to look at him for even one more second. He has killed countless people and is burdened with blood debts. It was only a wife who died, and it was even an accident. What is so great about that? Then the steward behind him suddenly said, could it be that Her Majesty the Empress deliberately arranged it this way, just to give the Duke a reason to accuse your Majesty? And your Majesty also said so many harsh things to her, so perhaps the Empress bears a grudge because of that. At this moment, an attendant suddenly walked over. Miss Roden says she has something important to report to you. Then tell her to meet me in the indoor courtyard here. If we meet there, I will not need to look at anyone else's face. In the imperial courtyard, the king suddenly stopped in his tracks. It turned out that the Empress had suddenly appeared before him. The steward looked awkward. Although this is a courtyard reserved for His Majesty the Emperor, His Majesty rarely comes here. So the management of the courtyard is rather lax. Perhaps when the servants saw that it was Her Majesty the Empress, they simply opened the gate for her. Then the Emperor strode forward. What are you doing in my courtyard? Here the Empress was taking a walk in the courtyard. Then the king suddenly said, taking a walk in this kind of weather. The Empress's preferences truly are special, and the Entra house is not to be entered without my permission. Did no one tell you that? But that is understandable. Not a single maid by your side belongs to the palace. The head maid looked flustered. That is because no one stopped us at all, so we truly did not know. If we had known earlier, we definitely would not have entered without permission. In that case, then it is not the Empress's fault. The Emperor immediately ordered the steward to transfer away all the attendants here. No matter how the Empress pleaded for them, it was useless. The king only did what he believed should be done. By the way, was the date of the imperial consort's conferral ceremony arranged by you on purpose? That day is your mother's death anniversary. Who would have thought that after hearing it? The Empress froze completely. It is all my fault. I was careless for a moment. Then the king said, if you dare do this again, I will definitely drive you out of the palace. The imperial consort's conferral ceremony has been handled so carelessly, and yet you still have the mood to come out for a walk. But before the king could finish speaking, there was suddenly a crisp cracking sound from the branch above. Along with the howling wind, the branch suddenly came crashing down toward the Emperor's head. At that instant, the Empress threw herself onto the king and knocked him down. The two lay on the ground, looking into each other's eyes. Even Kana, who had just arrived, was stunned. The Empress had only instinctively pushed the king down. She thought something was going to fall. Who would have thought that the king not only did not appreciate it, but instead said she was making a fuss over nothing. But the Empress was only worried that someone might get hurt. Even if the person standing before her had not been His Majesty, she would still have done the same. At the critical moment, the Empress suddenly threw herself onto the king. She even made the king's ears turn red. After the Empress left here, the king brought Kana to the courtyard. Then she suddenly said, while investigating, my father found a very strange point regarding the incident 14 years ago when your Majesty was kidnapped, not long after your Majesty returned to the palace. Duke Drull dismissed all the servants in the ducal residence. They called it dismissal, but later not a single one of those people could be found. They were either dead or missing. It is said there were more than 200 of them, and not one was left behind. And that precisely shows that the servants of the ducal residence cannot be unrelated to that matter. Otherwise, there would have been no need to get rid of every single one of them. This is obviously destroying evidence. But if that is not the case, then it is also possible that the evidence is actually still hidden in the ducal residence. But after that incident, the ducal residence had already replaced all its servants. So the servants currently in the residence know absolutely nothing about that matter. Of course, we still have to search, but we cannot just wait for the results. If the Duke really did kill them all, then we will never find any clues. But apart from the Duke, only she has always lived in the ducal residence. She can easily approach the Duke and the ducal residence, and she is also the only possible witness who may have seen everything, and is not the one whom the Duke would not guard against right by Her Majesty's side. After hearing that, the king frowned and said, "This sounds like you are asking me to seduce the Empress and make her my person. But the problem is, it is not only I who loathe the Empress. The Empress also loathes me, so that is impossible. But that is only because the way Your Majesty treats the Empress is the problem. You are so rude to her, and yet you still expect her to like you?" But Kana believed that, whether it was during that meal that day, or the expression she showed just now after seeing me, I feel that the Empress does not actually dislike you. But the king is the very person who wants to kill the queen's father. Do you think the queen would betray her own father for love? How could someone as cold as her possibly choose love? Kana's father is a very gentle man. Although he can be somewhat indecisive, no matter what I do, he always supports me. Even so, in the end my father still wanted me to marry someone I did not love, so I went against his wishes. I chose to cooperate with His Majesty so that I could be with the person I love, even though I knew that doing so might put my father in danger. The queen is not stupid. She should know very well what kind of person the Duke is. But you do not know how cruel your proposal is to the queen. Compared with everything I did to her before, this is even crueler to her. If things were really done as you said, the queen would become an unfilial daughter who betrayed her father for love and personally drove her own father to ruin, and to make matters worse, even that love would be false. In the end, the queen would lose everything. No matter how awful her father may be, if she truly lost him, she would not even be able to remain queen. But this too is unavoidable. To me, my love is more important. Once someone is blinded by love, they really will disregard everything. Your Majesty, just as I am willing to become your pawn. Love truly is the best excuse of all. The royal family has declined into its current state because of love as well. One after another, all for love. How ridiculous. If love is truly powerful enough to destroy everything, I would never do something so foolish. At this point, the king thought that ever since marrying the queen, no one had tried to poison or assassinate me again. But for more than a year after our marriage, I've been keeping my distance from the queen, and the Duke has also always looked at me strangely. Yet nothing at all has happened. That is too strange. Has he not always wanted to kill me? This sudden calm makes me uneasy instead. But after all, if Duke Drull were to harm Your Majesty now, it would do him no good, and the Duke is not that reckless a person either. After thinking it over, the king also felt that made sense. The Duke has always had his own principles when it comes to eliminating political enemies. Still, like father, like daughter. Who knows what tricks the queen will play? Unexpectedly, Kana came rushing over in a great hurry. It turned out that she had received a strange letter. The letter said, "Duke Drull will poison and kill you during the imperial consort investiture ceremony. It seems he thinks I am an easier target than Your Majesty. After all, bribing my servants is no difficult matter for the Duke, and once I am poisoned, the toxin will spread rapidly." But the king felt that this was very likely a trap, because we had never received such a secret letter before. So how could someone by the Duke's side send us such a letter? But this matter also cannot be investigated rashly by sending people out. It would be best to catch them red-handed on the spot and secure evidence. If we alert him and cause him to change his plan midway, it will be even harder to deal with then. For now, we can only use ourselves as bait first. On the day of the imperial consort investiture ceremony, Kana looked exceptionally beautiful as well. Outsiders all said that the two of them were very well matched, but so far, everything seemed calm and uneventful. Yet for the Duke to dare plot such a thing so boldly, it must be because he has the queen's help, or perhaps the whole thing was planned by the queen herself. The king suddenly stepped forward. "Queen, this investiture ceremony has been prepared very well, but relying on you alone, I am afraid it would have been difficult to make it this perfect. Would it not? This is your first time preparing an investiture ceremony, so there should be many things you do not understand. Was this really handled by you alone? Queen, you had better remember what I said. If you dare cause trouble, I will definitely drive you out of the palace. Remember it. I always do what I say." Who would have thought that after hearing this, the queen looked at him with a face full of pity. What the king meant was that if you intend to do anything to Kana, stop immediately. The investiture ceremony was arranged entirely by you, so if anything really happens, it will be the queen's responsibility. So stop setting your sights on Kana. The queen's face darkened. "In Your Majesty's eyes, am I that kind of person?" But the ruler's face was full of certainty. "Is there even a need to ask? I think you are capable of doing things even worse than this." Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, the queen instead felt that if something really happened to the imperial consort, it would actually benefit Your Majesty. Then you could take this opportunity to kill me, the queen you despise so deeply. The investiture banquet officially began. The king and the other two raised their wine glasses. After the emperor drank, It seemed there was nothing wrong with the wine. The king looked nervously toward Kana. At the same time, the queen also drank her wine, but before Kana could speak, the queen suddenly vomited a large amount of blood. In an instant, she collapsed onto the king. Seeing that she was still conscious, the king quickly took out the antidote and fed it to the queen.
Kana crouched down to examine it.
Unexpectedly, the test paper really changed color. Your Majesty, look quickly. There really is poison in the queen's wine. The emperor immediately pulled the queen tightly into his arms. The queen has been poisoned. Seal off all entrances and exits of the palace immediately. No evidence at all can be found inside the imperial council chamber. With so many people, they still could not find even the slightest bit of evidence. There were several suspicious people, but they are all already dead. Not a single clue was left behind, and those people were not even attendants of Her Majesty the Queen. When the king heard this news, he was stunned. To leave behind no trace, killing everyone involved, so that no evidence could be found even in the imperial palace. Only Duke Drull is capable of methods so brilliant and cruel. But the only suspect was also searching for the murder. Yet the investiture ceremony was personally overseen by the queen. So, who would do such a thing? The Duke flew into a rage and said, "By your logic, did the poison run into the wine cup by itself?" At the end of the day, who else could want to harm the queen? At this moment, the king suddenly shouted, "Enough! Will arguing solve anything?" After saying that, he drove them all out. Come to think of it, the Duke could not possibly harm his own daughter, and the way he looked that day, utterly panicked, did not seem like someone who had planned this. Then only two possibilities remain. Either the Duke mistakenly put the poison in the wrong cup, or someone switched the cups. But the Duke is not the kind of person who makes mistakes, and no one would switch the cups either, except for one person. The physician informed them that the queen's condition was not serious for the time being, and she would regain consciousness in a few days. Fortunately, she had only drunk a very small amount of the poisoned wine, and Your Majesty fed her the antidote in time, which was how her life was saved. The king came to the queen's side. Even he himself felt conflicted. Had I not always wished for her to disappear? Yet now I am guarding her here. Though it was absurd, the emperor only wanted to confirm his own suspicion. The only person who knew about this in advance and could switch the cups was you. But why did you not pour the poison wine away and instead drink it yourself? Unexpectedly, a tear slid down the queen's face. She slowly turned her head toward the king. The moment the queen opened her eyes and saw the king, she actually called him Carl. That form of address made the emperor freeze for a moment. The queen really has gone mad, daring to casually call me by my pet name. Could it be that the queen has another man who is also called Carl? It had also been a long time since the king had heard anyone call him that. Although that person from his childhood did not resemble the queen, why was it that every time he looked at the queen, he would think of her? The king recalled what the queen had said before, as well as what she had done. Yvonne had no reason to deliberately drink the poisoned wine. But what if Kana was right? The queen slowly opened her eyes a little. When she saw that the king was here as well, her whole body froze. From the emperor's words, I learned that I had already been poisoned and had been unconscious for 3 days. But unexpectedly, even after being poisoned, the queen remained so calm. Does she not even ask what exactly happened? The king suddenly spoke. You already knew the Duke's plan, did you not? The king, who had always detested the queen, suddenly held her hand and said, I am very worried about you. From the queen's reaction, the king became even more convinced of the suspicion in his heart, and he suddenly said, I am very worried about you, queen. And those words caused the queen to fall into memory. When she learned that she was going to marry the king, she was utterly shocked. The Duke wore a smile on his face. What is there to be so surprised about? You only need to keep doing as I say, just as you are now. And you had better not think about trying any tricks. Think carefully about your pitiful mother, Lillian. It turned out her real name was Lillian, Duke Drull's illegitimate daughter. After the Duchess and his real daughter, Yvonne, died, he brought my mother and me back from the slums to the ducal estate. Most of the time, I was locked in the basement. He beat me until I could not even move my fingers. And now the present Duke used my sick mother as a hostage to threaten me because he could not trust Lillian. So he invited the greatest magician on the entire continent. He commands a magic that forbids the leaking of secrets, which is perfect for sealing your mouth. This magic will not be lifted unless both the magician and I die. As the magic was cast, chains instantly filled the area around Lillian. If in the future you ever want to say something you should not say, no sound will come from your throat, and even if you try to write, you will not be able to write anything. Even after placing magic on me, the Duke still had doubts. He ordered me to keep a close watch on the Emperor and to find a way to win the Emperor's favor. He is also a normal young man, so he should not be able to resist temptation. But when Lillian thought of the Carloy from childhood, she felt that he would never accept me. You are the most heartbreaking girl in this comic, and all you wanted was to see your mother one more time. Yet you were threatened by the Duke and became his prisoner. You and the king had already met when you were young. You also knew very well that the Emperor hated Duke Drull deeply. Given the Emperor's personality, he would never show kindness to the daughter of his enemy. And on top of that, back then you were so thin you were skin and bones, and your clothes were shabby and miserable, completely different from how you are now. There was no way he could recognize you as the girl from those days. Yet now you look more and more like the Duke, and even you yourself feel pain because of it. They say the real Yvonne resembled the Duchess more, but although you hated the Duke that much, in the end you ended up looking like him. Every time you looked at yourself in the mirror, you felt like a stranger. You also often regretted not making a secret sign with a king that belonged only to the two of you. Strangely enough, even after so long, you still could not forget the promise the king once made to you. No matter who it was, how desperately you wished someone could hear your cry for help. How desperately you wished that heaven would grant you a miracle. If that happened, you would even be willing to forgive all the misfortunes you had suffered before. You kept fantasizing that maybe a miracle really would happen and Carl would remember you again. But you clearly knew that this hope itself was poison, one that would push you little by little toward a dead end. And yet you still prayed, praying that one day you could fulfill that promise you made in your ignorant youth. On the night you married the king, you were only marveling at the Duke's nearly perfect acting. But the Duke still used your mother's life to threaten you. You prayed that Carl would recognize you. But in the end, the miracle still did not come. Carl, you big idiot. Did you not say that you would not forget me? And on the night Carl came to find you of his own accord, it was only because he heard you say that you would personally teach him. And at that moment, you finally understood. You were no longer the Lillian you used to be, and he was no longer the Carl he once had been. She is the most pitiful girl I have ever seen, and all she wanted was to see her mother one more time. Yet she was threatened by the Duke and became his prisoner. Although the queen here understood that the king was no longer the Carl he used to be. But the queen also had to make him understand that only by joining hands with me and escaping the Duke's control would it be the most advantageous choice for him. So the queen made a request to the king to have a child. But not only was this rejected by the king, the queen was also cruelly wounded by his words. After the king left, the queen collapsed weakly onto the bed. At this moment, she could neither tell Carloy the truth nor directly join hands with Carloy. But neither could she fully obey the Duke and seduce Carloy. Right now, I can do nothing. I can only sink little by little into the abyss here. The queen, who thought she had finally escaped hell, ended up merely falling into another hell. She slowly closed her eyes, her mind filled with scenes of being with her mother in the past. Who would have thought that after the queen awoke, she truly heard her mother calling her? By the way, Arlu does not look too well. Lillian suddenly hugged her mother tightly. How is your health? Can you already move around? Are you completely recovered from your illness? Unexpectedly, her mother suddenly smiled and said, "You have only just woken up, and you are already acting spoiled with me." It seems Arlu still has not grown up, so becoming queen and all those things with the Duke had all merely been a dream. In the dream, there was a great villain who kept bullying me. I desperately tried to escape, but no matter what, I could not get out. Her mother said gently, "It is all right now, Lou. That was only a dream. Look, is mother not right here, safe and sound?" Unexpectedly, Mary beside them suddenly said, "The two of you really are so close." Lillian suddenly threw herself toward Aunt Mary. "Auntie, I really missed you so much. I had a very, very long dream, and after waking up from it, I truly missed you all so much. Have you ever seen such a pitiful young girl? She grew up in the slums. From childhood, she depended on her mother and lived with her alone. Although life was poor, her childhood was happy. But before true misfortune descended, she had not yet realized that her former life had actually been so happy." The Empress suddenly woke up from a nightmare. It turned out that it was only a dream. Meanwhile, the Duke was still rebuking the Empress. "News of your discord with the Emperor is already spreading everywhere outside. I went to great lengths to place you on the Empress's throne. So, what exactly are you doing?" Who would have thought that before the Empress could even say a few words in explanation, the Duke once again threatened her with her mother. "If this continues, your mother's medical expenses will stop here." The Empress merely nodded gently. "I will do my best. You had better try twice as hard. Or, the next time you see your mother, it will be when she is lying in a coffin. Did you not say that I would be able to see her soon?" Who would have thought that the Duke would suddenly fly into a rage and say, "You have made such a mess of things, and you still have the nerve to say that to me? If you want to see your mother, then change the situation for me, understood? If this goes on, I may never be able to see mother again." Duke Drull has always been extremely cruel to me, but especially lenient toward mother. Of course, the Duke's surface-level gentleness was all just a disguise. He merely wanted to keep Mother by his side as a hostage. But ever since Mother moved into the Duke's residence, her condition really has improved a great deal. A spacious and comfortable room, an expensive and soft bed, and countless attendants caring for her personally. In such an environment, it is only natural that her health would improve. But even if all of this is fake, as long as it can make Mother better, I am willing to do anything. What is more, Mother does not know that all this tenderness is false. Back then, when Mother learned that she was carrying the Duke's illegitimate daughter, she secretly fled because she was afraid of him. Later, when the Duke's wife and daughter died, he deceived Mother by saying that he wanted to make it up to us, and Mother truly believed him. I still remember that the last time I met Mother, She said that I had now become a refined and elegant young lady, and asked me whether I was living happily now. Hans Drull had long known that if Mother learned I was being coerced because of her, she would end her own life without hesitation. He was certain that I would never reveal his filthy truth. Who would have thought that Mother would suddenly hand her a piece of woven cloth? I originally wanted to make it bigger and use it as a blanket for you, but I truly did not have enough strength, so I could only make it this big. The Empress looked deeply distressed. Your health is so poor, and yet you still prepared this for me. Mother, you must live well. I will come to see you often, so please do not worry about me. Mother no longer coughs up blood, and she coughs less too. Mother can finally eat healthy and delicious food. She no longer has to eat garbage, nor pick petals to stave off hunger because of starvation, but can instead admire the flowers in the courtyard with a smile. Whenever the Empress saw these scenes, she would no longer regret anything. It is only such a price, after all, it is nothing at all. I endured even the Duke's beatings and abuse. As for Karl's sharp and cutting words, I only need to pretend not to hear them. Meanwhile, the Emperor was complaining to her about his father, and the Empress subconsciously replied that she understood. The Empress immediately realized that she had answered too quickly, and so she hurriedly apologized to the king. I want to pretend that nothing is wrong, to act as if everything is normal, but Carloy's hostile gaze still makes me feel so miserable that I can hardly breathe. Clearly, he looks no different from when he was little, yet the boy I once knew has long since disappeared. Now, all that remains is this man who wishes for my death every single day. She is the Empire's only Empress, yet the king has never loved her. More than that, the king even wants to kill the Empress before him with his own hands. But even so, in order to see her mother just once, the Empress still has to cast aside her dignity and take the initiative to invite the Emperor to stay the night in her palace. But every single time, he refuses her mercilessly. Conversations with Carloy are always like this. There is no way I can ignore what he says to my face. But as soon as I hear his voice, all those emotions buried deep in my heart surge up in an instant. Even so, I have no other choice. This is the only thing the Empress can do. Because only if the Emperor comes to stay in her bedchamber does the Empress have a chance to confess everything to him. And if you never come, no one knows what the Duke will do to the Empress. What is more, there are too many eyes in the palace constantly watching the Empress, and those attendants in name are in fact all spies planted by the Duke. What is more, I have also been placed under magic, and can only keep doing what is within my power over and over again. When the Empress once again invited the king to come to her palace, the king suddenly said, "If you disappeared, Empress, I might come and take a look." How tragic. Carloy never allows me near him, so ever since I became Empress, I have not been able to see Mother even once. I only want to see Mother, so why is it so difficult? When the Empress saw the Emperor bringing Kana to dine with him, she thought that this was merely another new way for him to torment me. Because before marrying me, he would never spare any woman a second glance, yet now he suddenly says he wants to confer the title of imperial consort. And on this continent, there are only 2 countries that allow concubines. At first I thought that he made such an absurd decision, in order to provoke Duke Drull and the Duke's faction of nobles. But the Carloy before me at this moment looks truly happy. And although the Empress does not understand Kana, if it were the Empress, she would probably fall in love with Kana too. Everything has already changed, only that smile is still the same as before. I still remember that in the past, the king's dream was to live happily together with the person he loved. If he really is taking an imperial consort for the sake of peace in his heart, then there is already nothing the Empress can do. But the Empress still remembers him in his youth, the way he smiled only at me, and the Empress clearly knows that she can no longer give him what he wants. But even so, she still holds hope in her heart, and the Empress always thinks of the king he once was. She really is about to be unable to endure any longer. And so, that day happened. She did not want to see any mirrors anymore, much less her own face. So she ordered the attendants to throw away all the mirrors. Whenever she saw that this face was becoming more and more like the Duke's, she would feel the urge to die, and even want to tear that face apart with her own hands. And not only this nauseating face, but even the fact that she cannot go near peach blossoms and lead to flowers is exactly the same as the Duke. But it just so happened that at this very moment, the Emperor came. This miserable and disheveled appearance of the Empress was what she least wanted the king to see. Why, of all times now, when the king reached out and pulled the Empress up, at that instant, the Empress was reminded once again of their childhood. When the Emperor once again mocked and sneered at her, at that moment, the Empress finally could not endure it any longer. In the most subtle way, she made the king vaguely understand that everything she had done was entirely for the king, and she herself also had to make a choice. Meanwhile, the Duke was still complaining about the Empress, saying that she even had to prepare the investiture ceremony for the imperial consort. Who would have thought that the Empress would calmly say, We can poison the imperial consort during the ceremony. There may not be such an opportunity again in the future. After all, the emperor simply does not allow me to be alone with a woman of the Roden family. And since she has to be eliminated sooner or later anyway, it would be best to act before she becomes the imperial consort. That way, it would actually be simpler. But if the imperial consort is poisoned at the investiture ceremony, then I will certainly become the prime suspect. But in the empress's view, dealing with such a situation should not be difficult for you, should it? She is not royalty anyway. When the time comes, the one who dies will merely be an insignificant woman. But since you have managed to come up with such a good method, I will take charge of preparing this matter. That day, torrential rain was pouring outside, and the empress suddenly thought of Mother. So, she wanted to go to the courtyard to take a look at the flowers Mother liked. She walked into the courtyard, unable to delay the imperial consort's investiture ceremony, and unable to ignore the duke's constant pressure. So, in her desperation, she uttered the word poison. 14 years ago, the empress had once told Carl that he must live on and do what he truly wanted to do. But the empress now keeps saying all day long that she can do nothing. Who would have thought that the king's voice would suddenly come from behind her? Clearly, he had said that he had no interest in this place at all and would not come often. Yet he appeared precisely when I was recalling the past. Who would have thought that the king had long forgotten what rainy days meant to her, and even spoke cold words of ridicule to the empress? Just as the empress was planning never to speak to him again in the future, a branch suddenly fell from above. Almost instinctively, the empress threw the king to the ground. It was only because she wanted to save him that she lunged over without the slightest hesitation. But what she received in return was still only the king's cold glare. After the empress saved him, it once again reenacted Carl's actions from those years. The similar scene and words almost overlapped with the past. She so hoped that Carl could remember, even if only a little. Who would have thought that after the king stood up, let alone remembering? Even his every movement was like someone who had touched something filthy and unclean. At this moment, the empress was so stifled that she could hardly breathe. Just as the empress was about to turn and leave, she unexpectedly bumped straight into Kana. Come to think of it, does this woman also have troubles? But if such a pure person were to lose her life because of me, if Carloy truly loves her, then what should the empress do? The king took Kana's hand and said, I was the one who called her here. Who was it that said they would bring me to see this courtyard, and personally made that promise?
I know.
Only you would be like this, Carl. You're a person who never keeps his word. The promise to take me to the courtyard, the promise never to forget me, the promise to protect me. In the end, not a single one was fulfilled. Meanwhile, the empress was still worried about the imperial consort,
For she could not just stand by and watch Kana die.
Moreover, Kana was still the only woman in the palace with whom Carl truly shared his heart, so no matter what, the secret letter had to be sent out. But when the empress wanted to reach out and touch those flowers, she was stopped by the head maid. These flowers grow only in the Manhwa Empire. They are flowers that commit suicide, called Solano. As long as an insect touches them, they spray out liquid and kill themselves. The empress had not expected that even a flower could choose its own ending. Then the empress suddenly said, I have decided. I will drink that cup of poisoned wine myself, because even if the empress obtained the antidote, she still would not be able to approach Miss Roden and hand it to her. Besides, if something happened, others would only think I did it on purpose. If things go this way, the Duke will not harm Mother, nor will he become suspicious, much less leave behind any evidence, because he will certainly silence everyone involved. I also hope Marianne can help me, because the Empress merely wants to truly make one decision for herself, just this once. Marianne held back her tears and said, I will help you find out what kind of poison it is. So, you must promise me that you will take the antidote first. The cup of wine before the Empress had originally been prepared for Kana, and my ending may also be death. But at this moment, I feel strangely relieved. Perhaps I truly do want to escape from all of this. The Duke should have known long ago that if he pushed me into a corner, I would not even care about Mother's safety anymore. I know that I am truly foolish. Carl, you so wish for me to disappear from before your eyes. So why are you showing such a worried expression? But if I can die in your arms, such an ending does not seem too bad. At the moment the Empress collapsed, she also remembered her childhood. That place had originally been a bandit's den hidden in the dark forest, a place used to kidnap, threaten, beat, and torture people. When the Empress was little, in order to survive, she went against her conscience and suppressed her guilt to do odd jobs for the bandits and earn money. And that was also the first time she had kidnapped such a small child. Who would have thought that the moment he saw me, his first reaction was actually to worry about me. And he even told me to run. Why would he worry about a stranger first? With your eyes closed, you remembered your childhood, remembered the scene of your first meeting with Carl. He himself was clearly tied up, yet he was still worrying about you. And at that time, you were still doing odd jobs for the bandits. When Carl saw you standing together with them, He completely took you for a bad person. As a result, Carl was slapped on the spot. You were sent by the bandits to run errands again, so you planned to come back to see him that night. By the time you returned, although he was still there, that face had already been beaten to a horrifying state. The more you resist, the harder they will beat you, so you had better stay here obediently. No one expected that when you were about to wipe Carl's face, he would actually complain that your hands were dirty. Of course you were unhappy about that, so in a huff, you wiped Carl's face clean. After wiping it, that face did not seem quite so serious, only somewhat swollen, and the inside of his mouth had also been split open. And you were actually stunned by his face, and stared at it for a long time without any dignity at all. You kindly stuffed a piece of bread into his hand, but who would have thought that he would still complain that it tasted bad? You even took out the jam you had treasured for a long time, and only then did you finally ask his name. But before you could exchange more than a few words, Carl suddenly made a complete 180-degree turn and told you to get out. Yet at that time you were still deliberately teasing him. You merely said that he had breadcrumbs on his face, and that alone made his whole face turn red with fright. If you ask me, you should just eat obediently. I will apply the medicine for you. But right after you finished putting medicine on Carl, you messed up his face all over again. Because if they discover that I am treating you this well, I will also be beaten to death. Carl immediately shouted after hearing this, telling you to leave quickly. But before you could walk out the door, Carl suddenly said, "Don't go. Don't leave me here alone. Don't abandon me here by myself." Just for a scheming woman he had only just met, he treated the Empress coldly. And the Empress was the one who had accompanied Carl through his hardest times. I still remember that when they were little, the Empress stayed with him all the way until dawn came. And because of that, she came to know a few things about him. Carl was born into a wealthy family, and the one who ordered his kidnapping was someone coveting something belonging to his family. She secretly overheard the adults talking, and it seemed that things were not going as smoothly as they had expected. When she came to that little hut again, Carl had once more been beaten until his head was bloodied. Who would have thought that Carl would glare furiously and tell me to get lost? His eyes filled with anger. Lillian set the bread down here, and just as she turned to leave, Carl unexpectedly pleaded with red-rimmed eyes for Lillian not to go. Lillian slowly sat down. "Do not worry, you will be able to get out soon. The people brought here in the past all went home in the end, and I helped them because my mother is very sick and needs medicine, but I have nowhere to earn money." Who would have thought that after hearing this, Carl would suddenly say, "Don't worry, Auntie will get better soon." Carl seemed to think for a moment, then said, "Turn over my pants, not the pocket. Turn the inside." These words startled Lillian, and they made Carl so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. "What are you thinking? I am not talking about the clothes next to my skin. I mean the inside of the pants." So Lillian reached in and felt around, and unexpectedly pulled out a red bundle. Inside was a gleaming brooch. "Take it and sell it. It should fetch a lot of money." Who would have thought that Lillian returned it to him? "Because even if you gave this to me, I still could not let you go." Unexpectedly, Carl suddenly said, "I just thought that rather than letting those people take it, I would rather give it to you. So just keep it." Who would have thought that Lillian kept staring at him? She stared until Carl's whole face turned red. "Do not look at me with your eyes so wide open. You are doing it on purpose, aren't you? Why are you suddenly not letting me look now? I understand. You think I am dirty and ugly, right? For someone as good looking as you, I know what you are thinking even if you do not say it, but I do not care because I also know that I am ugly." Who would have thought that these words instead pushed Carl into a fluster? "I already said it is not because of that. Your eyes are very beautiful." The air suddenly fell silent. By the time Carl came to his senses, his face was already completely red. "What? Are you that hungry? You are actually praising me like this just for something to eat? Well then, if that is the case, I will just squint my eyes." Carl said with an awkwardly proud expression, "Give me the holdo you brought. I am hungry." Sometimes he really is very cute, and he even says the kind of things that make people happy. Could it be that my eyes really are beautiful? Lillian took out the brooch from her pocket. "It seems my eyes really are not bad after all." Lillian happily ran off to find her mother. She actually brought back enough medicine to last her mother an entire year. "Once you get better, let's go enjoy the flowers together like we used to." The mother and daughter embraced each other happily. The expensive medicine really was effective. Starting from the second day of taking it, her mother's coughing noticeably lessened, and she gradually became able to get out of bed and move around. All of this was thanks to Carl. But just as Lillian was preparing to sincerely thank him, she heard news that the bandits were going to kill him. Holding the money she had exchanged for the brooch, she hurried to the place where Carl was being held. Carl said with a delighted expression, "What did you bring today? Holdo again? This time I definitely won't be picky anymore." But Lillian didn't say a word because she didn't want to take advantage of Carl's kindness. She decided to save this boy. It turned out that on that rainy night, Lillian bought flibby stones that could gather rainwater so that when the time came, she could use them to crush the roof. Then she could use onto stones, which could disperse rainwater, to avoid the curtain of rain and escape. But just as she was about to leave, a voice suddenly called out to her. It turned out to be the gem merchant who had bought the brooch. "Hey, you there, where exactly did that brooch come from? That thing wasn't an imitation at all." Lillian looked at him anxiously. "Then was the money you gave me also calculated at the price of an imitation?" Unexpectedly, the gem merchant shook his head. It turned out he only wanted to ask Lillian's name. She suddenly turned around and said, "That's none of your concern." But Carl unexpectedly refused her proposal. "Because my family has already abandoned me. Even if I escape, where could I possibly go? So there's no need for you to persuade me anymore. Letting me go won't do any good either." Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Lillian directly gave him a harsh scolding. Grabbing his collar, Lillian said, "Didn't you say you wanted revenge? You idiot. Then go back and confirm it yourself. Go and see who made that decision, and make them regret it for the rest of their lives." Seeing that Carl said nothing, Lillian had just turned to leave, when Carl suddenly shouted, "Fine, I'll go." "All right." Lillian placed the water-gathering stones on the roof. The houses there then began collapsing one after another. Lillian and Carl tied the dispersing stones to their bodies. Unexpectedly, a loud crash suddenly came from the roof. Carl suddenly threw himself over Lillian and shielded her with his body. Lillian sprang up and shouted, "Are you crazy? Why would you do that?" It turned out Carl simply didn't want anyone to get hurt right in front of him. Lillian took Carl's hand. "Let's get out of here quickly first. Those bandits will be here soon." This was also the first time Carl had ever felt warmth. Then Lillian suddenly fell to the ground. She got up, brushed the dust off herself, and wanted to keep walking. How can you be so careless? Anyone who ignores their own wounds is someone who doesn't know how to love themselves. Unexpectedly, Lillian suddenly shot back. "That's why you should cherish your body even more. You got hurt protecting me just now, didn't you?" They came to a cave. Carl suddenly said to Lillian, "Why did you save me?" Lillian looked into Carl's eyes. Everything she had experienced together with him kept flashing through her mind. She stammered and said, "I just didn't want to see someone get hurt, so I helped you." Unexpectedly, Carl pursed his lips and smiled.
You look so silly right now.
This was the first time Carl had seen flowers blooming in the wild, because the flowers in his home all bloomed through magic, so they would never have colors like these. And this flower is a little like you, too. Looking at flowers always makes Carl feel better. And seeing these flowers that wither again and again only to bloom once more helps me endure those hardest times. My home also has a very large garden. You would definitely like it. If I get the chance, I'll definitely take you there." Unexpectedly, Lillian suddenly started trembling all over. Carl looked full of heartache. "But once you get through this forest, you'll reach Dalang City in Markia. Security there is very good. As long as Carl gets there, he'll be safe. Then you stay here until the rain stops before going home, and take your mother away from here. By now they have probably already discovered that my corpse isn't there, and besides, you don't understand the Duke. As soon as he realizes the plan has failed, he will kill everyone connected to this matter. Because it's raining heavily right now, they can't do anything for the time being, but later it will be hard to say. So you better go to Markia territory as well. I will definitely come find you." Just as Carl was about to leave, Lillian suddenly grabbed him. "You stay a little longer too. It's still raining outside." "Lou, you've already done more than enough. What you've given up for me is far more than what I've given you. I'm truly grateful to you, and I will absolutely never forget you. In the past, I had nothing I wanted to protect, but now it's different." Lillian told Carl her name. Unexpectedly, Carl said her name was like a beautiful jade. "So you already knew I was the Empress. I will make you someone everyone envies. I will always protect you." The Empress slowly opened her eyes. Unexpectedly, she had survived once again. When she looked up, Carl was actually sitting right in front of her. Unexpectedly, the king had heard the Empress calling Carl's name in her dream, but he had clearly long since forgotten me completely. Just as the Empress was regretting that dream, the king suddenly took the Empress's hand, and he even said, "I was very worried about you." This made the Empress wonder if she was still dreaming, but she knew that she was no longer the Lillian she used to be. The Empress suddenly withdrew her hand. "You are so busy, yet you still wasted so much time on me. I sincerely apologize to you, but as a husband, worrying about one's wife is only natural. No matter what, it's enough that you're all right." Watching his every move, the Empress was completely stunned, but she no longer wanted to go through what had happened before. "Your Majesty must have been frightened too. You look somewhat tired, so why not go back and rest first?" Because if things turned out the same as before again, the Empress truly would not be able to bear it. Suddenly, someone woke the Empress. It turned out to be the healer the Duke had previously found to cover the wounds on my body, and he was also Duke Drull's confidant. Thank heavens. After your Majesty drank the poison, if his Majesty had not taken out the antidote in time. The Empress looked at him in confusion. It turned out his Majesty had taken out the antidote he carried with him, and personally fed it to you. I never thought the person who would save me in the end would be Carloy. Since you wanted to be cruel to me, then you should have been cruel to the very end. Why did you have to do this? Then the king suddenly changed the way he addressed the imperial consort, calling her Miss Roden. The king suddenly said, "The Marquis only knows that Kana and I wanted to use the Empress to bring down the Duke. But he doesn't know that there is actually a contract between Kana and me. I was the one who let it slip first, Kana. Speaking of which, you should also change how you address me and call me the Imperial Consort now. Although the poisoning incident happened at the investiture ceremony, so the blame fell on me as well, I am already the Imperial Consort." Unexpectedly, At the mention of this, Marquis Rodin actually burst into tears. The imperial consort and the king said at the same time, since it has already happened, you should first go and study those nobles. The Rodin family has always belonged to the royalist faction, but as the head of the Rodin family, because of his indecisive nature, he was always thinking of looking for a chance to withdraw, and he also failed to stop the Duke's faction nobles from making an issue of it. This is what you should be doing now, Marquis. But in the Marquis's view, how could it be that Jane? Your Majesty, I have said many times already, the one who should lead the nobles is not me. Hearing this, the king froze on the spot, just as he was full of anticipation and wanted to hear the answer. The imperial consort suddenly took the Marquis's hand and said to him, "Stop talking, father. Why don't you eat some bread first?" But the Marquis complained that the bread here was too hard, and it was covered in piñata sauce. What's wrong? At this moment, the king lowered his voice and said, "What about Holdo? I'll have someone bring the pastries you like right away. Then you won't complain anymore, will you?" The imperial consort suddenly interjected, "Anyway, I think that if our intentions are too obvious, not only will the Empress not take the bait, she will only distance herself even more." Hearing you say that, anyone who didn't know better would think I was confessing my feelings to the Empress. But I only want to tell her that I have already acknowledged the Empress's existence. To celebrate the Empress's recovery, the king here, to celebrate the Empress's recovery, presented the Empress with the royal necklace that had been passed down from generation to generation. But according to custom, this necklace should originally have been bestowed on the wedding day. I can't believe that only after you died and came back to life did he finally acknowledge you. I can't believe that only after you died and came back to life did he finally acknowledge you. But the emperor must have said something to you too, right? But did the emperor also say something to you? The empress clasped her hands tightly. He didn't say anything special, just that he was very worried about me. The duke was shocked when he heard this news. You couldn't have joined hands behind my back, could you? Didn't the maids tell you? In the emperor's eyes, I am worth less than even a stone by the roadside. As for what exactly he is planning, if we wait a little longer, won't we find out? The one who almost died was me, but the one who changed was the emperor. I will keep a close eye on the emperor's every move. First, we must figure out what exactly he wants to do. The empress who had returned from death had also come to understand many things. Who can guarantee that something like this poisoning won't happen again in the future? Besides, I miss my mother too. After hearing this, the duke smiled faintly. You should first figure out what the emperor is thinking. For now, the duke won't suspect me, but there's no telling what day he might change his mind and threaten me again. And I can no longer go on as I did before. I have to change myself. The king and the imperial consort were still discussing countermeasures, but the imperial consort also felt that the empress would definitely think the king had ulterior motives. The duke and the empress both love her deeply. I don't understand what exactly Miss Rodin is worried about. Unexpectedly, the king's words startled the imperial consort. If others heard that, they'd think His Majesty and I are very distant with each other. The empress stood alone, gazing out the window. Only after asking the maid did she find out. It turned out that she only wanted to see her mother as soon as possible, because being separated from her mother like this was ultimately not a long-term solution. So, I must think of a way as soon as possible. I need to make the emperor drive me out of the palace, while also making sure the duke cannot shift the blame onto me. Only then can I return to my mother's side, and the duke has people watching me everywhere, so even writing a letter is very inconvenient. Unexpectedly, the emperor suddenly sent someone with a message. His Majesty hopes to have lunch with you today at the main palace annex, and this time, he even sent flowers. Unexpectedly, even the maids all suspected the flowers had been delivered to the wrong place. But the main palace annex was the emperor's most private space. The empress still decided to go and deal with it, because only by doing so could she come up with a way to respond. Honestly, it's really hard to understand. Has His Majesty the emperor truly been shaken by the previous poisoning incident? But as for what exactly he is plotting, I'll know once I go. Unexpectedly, among the flowers His Majesty sent, there were Li-Tu flowers. You've served for over a year already. Don't tell me you still don't know you can't touch it? With such gorgeous and conspicuous flowers, how could you possibly not notice them? The rash pink-haired girl before her was the younger sister of Count Anson, who was as close as brothers with Duke Droll. And the reason she kept making mistakes was because her main task was to monitor me. The healer let out a soft sigh. His Majesty needs quiet recuperation. What on earth are you all doing? By the way, doesn't His Majesty the Emperor know that the Empress, like the Duke, cannot come into contact with Li-Tu flowers? The pink-haired girl suddenly said, could it be that His Majesty the Emperor deliberately sent Li-Tu flowers? Everyone present was instantly shocked by her words. He is the most absurd emperor I have ever seen. He says he wants to acknowledge the Empress, but once they get to the dining table, he makes her cry again. The Empress lay on the bed because she had been poisoned by the flower fragrance. And she also knew very well that if Carloy found out that even these symptoms of mine were the same as the Duke's, he would definitely loathe me even more. So the Empress had the blue-haired maid deliver a message, saying that she could not have lunch with His Majesty. Her name was Gabriel, and she had only become a maid through Anson's connections, so she seemed very satisfied with the current situation. But in the final analysis, she was still someone the Duke had sent to monitor the Empress, so the Empress did not like her either. From the blue-haired maid, she learned that His Majesty the Emperor had told the Empress to come over again tomorrow evening. After everyone left, the Empress thought to herself, how useless. I had only just made up my mind, and yet I am already wavering again. Why is it that even my physical constitution is the same as the Duke's? And why did Carloy have to send Lee to flowers of all things? How hateful. The next evening, as agreed, the Empress arrived at the king's main palace. The king suddenly stood up. I heard you weren't feeling well yesterday. It seems the remaining poison still hasn't fully cleared, but seeing that you're in good spirits today puts my mind at ease. The Empress unexpectedly asked the king reflexively, really? What else? Did you think I didn't want you to be well? Looking at the Empress's shocked expression. I misspoke just now, but I truly was worried about you.
I hope you won't misunderstand.
Even the pink-haired girl beside them could tell. His Majesty the Emperor was doing it on purpose. When the Empress sat down, even her movements were hesitant. When the king asked her why she still wasn't sitting down, the attendant suddenly said, Her Majesty the Empress gets skin allergies whenever she goes nearly to flowers. Damn it, I didn't even know something like that. So how am I supposed to win the Empress over? Come to think of it, her constitution is exactly the same as the Duke's, just like Jane's. What an eyesore. The Empress then went to have dinner with the king. Yesterday, the Empress had already been poisoned by the flowers the king sent. Today, the king served peaches as the appetizer again. At once, the Empress's expression darkened again. The king was stunned when he saw this. What are you dissatisfied with now? Your Majesty, if you wish to torment me, you might as well use another method. Yesterday, Your Majesty sent me flowers. That bouquet also contained Lita flowers. At first, I did not know, so I placed the flowers in my room, and as a result, I felt unwell. Who would have thought that the king would suddenly say, then why didn't you check carefully first? If you knew it was something bad for your body, why didn't you make sure in advance? The Empress truly could not understand. Was saying I'm sorry really that difficult? Also, I cannot eat peaches. If I eat peaches, I will have difficulty breathing. Couldn't you have told me this in advance? So the king hurriedly ordered the attendants to replace the food. Empress, why do you have so many taboos? Are these also inherited from the Duke? Hearing this, the Empress was completely stunned. She quickly covered her injured arm with her hand. If Your Majesty dislikes me so much, you might as well treat me as if I do not exist. Just as before. Do not summon me personally only to turn around and blame me. Some things are not my fault. The king looked awkward. It is not that I dislike the Empress. I am truly sorry. Perhaps the remaining poison in my body is not yet cleared, and I have not fully recovered. It's all right. There is no need to take it to heart. I merely intended to separate the Duke from the Empress in my view. Although you are the Duke's daughter, that is not your fault. The Empress had not expected Carloy to dislike her so much. He could not even bring himself to say something perfunctory, like, I don't dislike you. Seeing that the atmosphere was off, the king then asked the Empress whether she had received the wolf's tear. That should have been given to you much earlier. I am sorry it was delivered somewhat late. It was my fault for not giving you the treatment you deserved. I now wish to make up for my past shortcomings, and I hope you can accept that. When the king heard the Empress say it was all right, he finally let out a sigh of relief. From now on, let us meet often like this as well. I have matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first. The king had a smile on his face. Empress, enjoy your meal at your leisure. Yes, it is still the same as always. You have not changed at all. Why is it that every time I am the only one who takes it seriously? The king then went to find the healer. From him, he learned that there was nothing wrong with the king's body. So, where exactly was he feeling unwell? His Majesty had just gone to eat an extremely unpleasant meal. Who would have thought that the moment the healer took out a bottle of medicine, the king would snatch it away at once? He drank it all down in one breath. Seeing that the bottle was empty, the king ordered them all to withdraw. A strong wave of nausea suddenly surged up. Damn it! What exactly did those tears mean just now? And today her expression in particular, it actually made the king think of Lillian. He suddenly slammed his fist onto the table. The royal physician was right. Perhaps government affairs truly have been too burdensome, and there really is something wrong with my mind. I truly should rest. To think that I would see Lou's shadow in Droll's daughter. And Arthur has not sent a letter for a whole month. He will soon return to Cloyson from Verney. And it is not just Verney. The king had also entrusted him with another task. The king's heart began beating faster and faster. He kept reminding himself that he absolutely must not hope, because the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. After learning that the emperor and the empress had dined together, the duke even came specially to ask about it. Although he did not know exactly what had changed in the emperor's attitude toward the empress, he still restrained the duke at every turn. Moreover, it was said that the emperor had also invited Marquis Rodin and entertained him with the honors due to a state guest. The empress also knew that this was what the maids had mentioned before. When the king is with Her Highness the Imperial Consort, he becomes a completely different person. It is said that he often invites Marquis Rodin into the palace to sit and chat. So when he is with the Imperial Consort, he can smile as well. But between the Empress and Carloy, there was only silence and icy air. Who would have thought that when the Duke mentioned this, he he would suddenly fly into a rage. The emperor only shared your bed once. And after that, there was no news from him at all, right? That fellow choosing the day of the investiture ceremony must have been deliberate too. And what about the imperial consort? Have you been keeping a close watch on her? But the empress and the imperial consort had hardly met to begin with, so she did not really know. The duke shouted angrily, "You must make the imperial consort kneel before you. Since you entered the palace under the name of Droll, how can you not understand how to use that? Show her some color." Utterly useless. Since the emperor has already said he will give you the treatment due to an empress, then you should make good use of that, and you should also try to get closer to the emperor. Then the empress handed the duke a letter. "Please pass this letter to mother. It has been so long since I contacted her that I am afraid she will worry." The duke snatched the letter away at once. "You should first find me some leverage against the imperial consort before saying anything else." Then the head maid suddenly said that through the last council meeting, the nobles sent by the duke had strongly demanded the abolition of the imperial consort system. Moreover, quite a few people had already begun to dislike the imperial consort. It seemed that the duke truly detested Marquis Roden. That king who could make the empress cry with just a few words had actually taken the initiative to praise the empress for being beautiful. The attendant here was still carefully dressing the empress, because she felt that going to the garden with his majesty was a very romantic thing, although the empress did not actually like the garden. When she had gone there before, it was only because she simply missed her mother. On the way to the garden, the empress's mind was also full of the things the duke had instructed her to do. The king had long since been waiting in the garden, and his mind, too, was constantly flashing with the empress's figure. The more he thought, the more he felt he was about to go mad. So he took out the medicine from his chest and drank it directly. He said with his mouth that he did not like it, yet even the steward thought this place was romantic. At last, the empress arrived. As a result, the moment the king saw the empress, his gaze froze. He smiled faintly and said, "Please sit." I felt that the last time I did not take proper care of the empress, so I made preparations again. But who knew that this time the empress's reply would also be beyond the king's expectations? I think so too. I was actually always very sorry in my heart for having behaved improperly in front of you last time. Unexpectedly, the king also did not act according to common sense. "This necklace suits you very well." That single compliment made the empress's face turn red at once. "But why does he keep staring at me like this? I heard that the empress likes the garden, so I specially invited you here." In truth, the empress was not especially interested in flowers and plants. She simply could not explain the reason, and merely wandered around casually. It was as if she were pursuing an answer she could never obtain, and a promise that could never be kept. But the empress still came to Carloy's garden. "Yes, I truly like this place very much." The empress noticed that the king's expression seemed somewhat strange. Could it be that the king does not like flowers? "I heard that you almost never go to the garden." It was not that the king disliked them. It was just that flowers would always remind him of those promises that had not been kept, and those people he had failed to protect. The empress then used words she had said to the king when they were children to test him. As it turned out, the king really still remembered Lillian. At this moment, how dearly the empress wished that the king could recognize her. And the empress also felt the silencing magic the mage had placed on her. She had not intended to say the name Lillian directly, but for some reason, she simply could not say it. When the empress asked what kind of person she was someone even I could do nothing about. Unexpectedly, merely talking about these trivial matters made the empress somewhat emotional. But before long, it would be Alba Sun Ring Day. That was the day to commemorate the White Wolf, the creator god, and also the day when all the countries on the continent held celebrations. Cloyson would also hold a celebration in the Imperial Palace, but during last year's Alba Sun Ring Day royal celebration, the empress had been excluded. "By the way, why are you suddenly bringing this up to me?" The king suddenly said, "What I mean is, should this time's royal celebration be prepared by the empress? I know the time is not ample, so I want the imperial consort to assist you in preparing it." But the empress knew that this was only asking me on the surface. "I have already spoken with the imperial consort, and she will assist you. If it is only for the sake of form, then you should at least inform me, the empress, first. I still have state affairs to handle, so I will take my leave first. Enjoy yourself slowly." Who would have thought that the empress would actually say, "There is no need to trouble yourself over it"? While handling state affairs, the king unexpectedly thought of the empress again. Could it be that she had grown thinner than when I first met her? And why exactly did those eyes look so similar? Because she had been threatened by the duke. She actually took the initiative to invite the king to her own bedchamber. Through meeting the empress twice, the king had actually seen Lillian's shadow in her. Moreover, she had also told the king not to trouble himself. The matter of the emperor entrusting the Alba Sun Ring Day celebration to the empress had already spread throughout the palace. Although it is being prepared together with the imperial consort, compared with last year, His Majesty's attitude truly is different. The empress then received a secret letter. The duke also believed that the emperor must have other intentions. In order to let the imperial consort make freer use of me, He wants to monitor me while also trying to seize my weakness. Who would have thought that the Empress would suddenly become dejected? So that is why you requested to share His Majesty's bed and called him to your bedchamber. I would like to see just how far he can keep pretending to accept you." The Empress suddenly snatched the letter away. "There is no need for you to read it aloud to me in such a loud voice. Just 6 months ago, he still rejected me cleanly and decisively. But since the Duke has already given the order, I can only do as told. Yet ever since the last meeting, the king has still been the same as always. That Carloy would actually fall in love with someone is truly hard to imagine. How about you first take the initiative to invite His Majesty the Emperor? No one knows when His Majesty the Emperor will summon you again." The Empress clenched her fists. "In order to see Mother once, I must take the initiative. Marianne, go get some letter paper. By now, I am already used to being rejected by him." The king then received the Empress's letter. Come to think of it carefully, it seems she has never taken the initiative to invite me before, has she? The king looked at the letter before him. The handwriting was as neat and orderly as she herself was. She said she wants to have tea with me. It seems that this afternoon, I will have to make a trip to the Empress's palace. But the moment he heard that the Empress was inviting him to sleep together, he was so shocked that he sprayed out the water in his mouth on the spot. The queen here invited the king to have tea in the garden. Just when the king felt that things were not that Jane simple, who would have thought that the queen would suddenly say, "Would you come to my bedchamber once?" After hearing this, the king choked on the spot. After the king recovered, he asked the queen again what she had just said. The queen clasped her hands tightly. "I was asking whether your Majesty could sleep in my bedchamber tonight." But the king fell silent for a moment. Was this her purpose? If I want to win over the queen, this sort of thing was bound to happen sooner or later. It was just faster than I had imagined, and she was asking me with such a completely expectantless expression. Obviously, this was Duke Droll's arrangement. But just as the queen was about to give up, the king actually agreed to her request. "Then, tonight, I will come to see you. Since he wants to test me, I will play along with him. Her acting is really far too poor. How exactly am I supposed to keep acting along with her?" Then the queen suddenly said, "Then I will wait for you tonight." Understood. His Majesty seems not to like bread very much. Could it be that I chose the wrong dessert? As if the moment His Majesty saw our emperor, he instantly lost his appetite. That is why he would not even touch the dessert. The butler looked helpless. "Then I will tell you. What His Majesty likes most is..." Here the queen noticed the head maid, so she wanted them to add a little more bread. That was the huldo bread. Who would have expected that the queen was shocked after hearing it? How could they give His Majesty that kind of bread? But at this moment, the king's face suddenly turned red. When the queen saw that the king's ears had reddened upon hearing about huldo bread, she became even more certain of the guess in her heart. So she quickly told Marianne to bring huldo, and if there was piñata sauce, to bring that too. The butler was shocked after hearing this, thinking, how would the queen know that His Majesty must eat it with piñata sauce? Could it be that even this kind of thing could be found out by the Duke? At this moment, the king looked at the butler with a darkly scheming expression. He really had been wronged badly. Then the queen suddenly said, "If you had told me in advance, I would have prepared it beforehand." Just when the king said that he had not yet reached the point of liking that so much, the queen said with a shy face, "But I like it very much. After coming here, I had never really dared to eat these things. But since your Majesty also thinks it is good, that is wonderful." The queen gently spread the piñata sauce on the huldo bread. The piñata flower blooms in Droll territory, so it is very familiar to me. But the king also had not expected that a duke's daughter like the queen would also like these things. Usually nobles would not even touch them. After all, there are many things more precious and more delicious than this. However, does not your Supreme Majesty also leave all the other delicacies untouched and choose to eat huldo instead? The king kept looking at the queen seriously. Could it be that I was mistaken? It was obviously still the same face as before, the face that said it would persuade me. Also that face that made me yield to Droll. And moreover, it always treated my words as though they were mere wind by the ear. But why do I feel so suffocated today? The emperor, who had always treated the queen coldly, actually knelt before her on the spot after arriving at her bedchamber. Recently, the king's dosage of medicine had been getting larger and larger, and the butler worried about the king's health. So he suggested, "Your Majesty, rather than going to the queen's palace yourself, would it not be better to have Her Majesty the queen move to the royal special chamber in another palace?" But if the king really did that, his mother's departed soul would probably float up from the sea of lupus. And I also do not want to see Duke Droll become smug because of it, so in any case, not now. That royal special chamber, which could only be used by the emperor and the queen, was also the place where His Majesty's birth mother was poisoned by Duke Droll and breathed her last. Perhaps that was the place His Majesty least wished to set foot in. Just as the king was preparing to go to the queen's bedchamber, the butler suddenly stopped him. "Your Majesty, you may go, but you absolutely must not fall asleep." The king patted the butler on the shoulder. "Even if you told me to sleep, I would not be able to, so stop worrying." The king stood before the door of the queen's bedchamber. At this time, the queen was still constantly tidying her hair. The head maid also kept comforting her. "It will be fine. This is not some other place. This is His Majesty's bedchamber." But he said that no one was needed to attend him at bedtime and told everyone to withdraw. The queen clenched both fists. If His Majesty suddenly behaves recklessly, What should I do? After hearing this, the head maid suddenly rolled up her sleeves. If anything really happens, just call out loudly for me. I will rush in at once. But since His Majesty said he would give you the treatment due a queen, then perhaps he only wants to put on a show for others. But Carloy, why do you still remember Lillian? It would be better if you forgot her completely. If that were the case, I too could accept everything about you. She was the most pitiful queen I had ever seen, only because she was threatened by the Duke. She actually had to share a bed with the person she hated to the bone. The queen here was not yet ready, yet the king had already appeared before her. Carloy really is a troublesome man. Seeing this, the attendants all withdrew as well. At this moment, both of them seemed to harbor their own concerns.
Thinking about it now,
Since last time, this was the second time the king had come here, while he was still wondering why the queen had done that at the time. Are you feeling unwell somewhere? But the king had only just stubbornly said he was fine, when a sudden stabbing pain came from his chest. Then, he instantly fell to his knees before the queen. Hearing the commotion, the attendants also rushed over one after another. But before the butler could even ask the reason clearly, he suddenly shouted at the queen, "What exactly is going on?" And he even glared at the queen with an extremely fierce look. In the butler's heart, like father, like daughter, this queen who might make a move against the emperor at any time. They called for the emperor's healer. "Tell me, are you sure it was indigestion before? Your Majesty, if the medicine I prescribed for you is taken in excessive amounts under normal circumstances, it will trigger severe pain. Your Majesty, have you recently had anything troubling you, or anything that has been weighing on your mind? If this happens often, it can also cause this kind of chest tightness." Then the emperor suddenly said, "There is no such thing. Just prescribe me painkillers. Gordon, I am already fine. You may withdraw as well. Could it be that you still want to overstep your bounds?" The butler bowed deeply to the queen. "I was too rash and offended you, Your Majesty the Queen." The queen suppressed her anger with great effort. "Chief attendant, if I truly wanted to harm His Majesty, then something would already have happened long ago. Would it not?" After everything had been explained clearly, the queen had them all withdraw. The two people who had once hated each other to the bone were now lying on the same bed. After all the attendants withdrew here, the queen said to the king, "You may feel unwell all night tonight. Can you really hold on with only painkillers? Painkillers can only suppress the pain. They cannot possibly solve the problem of chest tightness itself, can they?" Who would have thought the king was still acting strong? It is only that government affairs have been too burdensome lately. After resting for a few days, I will be fine. The king slowly sat down. "How long are you going to keep standing there? I will not do anything, so you do not need to worry." But after the lights were put out, the king seemed exceptionally restless. "She is Droll's daughter. Even if I do not like it, I have to pretend that I do." But the queen suddenly said, "I am not used to sleeping in a completely dark room. May one lamp be left on?" And so, the two of them lay on the same bed like this. The king secretly glanced at the queen. Unexpectedly, she was sleeping especially soundly. But the king kept tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The king tonight was probably destined not to sleep. About 2 hours passed, and the king still maintained that posture. Who would have thought that the queen suddenly got up? Because there was no sound of the heavy door opening. She should be in the indoor corridor. Although the king had only been to that place once when he was little, he still remembered where it led. But at this hour, what was the queen going there to do? The king carried a lamp and quietly followed behind her. When he walked out, he was stunned on the spot. This was a small courtyard built by a former emperor for his beloved queen, so that the deeply loved queen could see flowers even at night. It was also built so that he could whisper words of love to his beloved queen at any time. It was also called the Moonlight Garden. But right in this garden, Yvonne was sitting there. The king, out of curiosity, followed the queen here. He came to the garden built by the former emperor, and the sight of the queen sitting in the garden actually reminded him of Lillian. The king rubbed his eyes. "Queen, it is so late. Why are you still not asleep? The night is cool. Be careful not to catch cold." The queen suddenly stepped forward. "It is so late for your Majesty to come out. Are you returning to the emperor's palace?" So it turned out that he had followed because he heard the sound of the queen getting up. Because the king could not sleep, perhaps it was my place that made your Majesty uncomfortable. The king merely changed beds and is a little unaccustomed to it. Speaking of which, these flowers can be seen at any time. Do you not grow tired of them? Who would have thought that the queen's memories of the past with Carl surfaced in her mind again? "Carl, do you know? Lately, I have always been thinking about these things. Why do you always spend time in the courtyard? Are you passing time or waiting for some change?" Although I was never able to ask these words aloud, these flowers can help dispel some distracting thoughts for me. Who would have thought that the king again asked the queen some questions she could not answer? Speaking of which, since your Majesty despises me so much, why are you suddenly treating me like this again? For example, thoughts like this would come up, right? The king was stunned after hearing this. "I told you already, I do not despise you. But to tell the truth, it is impossible for me to fall in love with the queen. Perhaps this is very unfair to you, but it is not something I can control either. After all, as for Drull, it is truly hard for me to put into words. Who would have thought that the queen suddenly called out to stop the king? Your Majesty, I know, actually, even if you do not say it, I understand very clearly. When the king heard these strangely familiar words, I know this is not the queen's fault, so I want to try not to hate you anymore. But actually, there is no need for you to force yourself either, though now it seems. It is not that I hate you, but that you hate me. The queen looked flustered. That is not what I meant. Since you do not hate me, that is enough. Let us go inside. Speaking of which, Queen, you clearly do not like me being near you, so why do you always deny it? But the queen did not dislike your Majesty. She only felt embarrassed. But in the king's heart, she was only enduring it all this time in order to help the duke. Then the king suddenly stopped walking. Queen, to me, the duke is a demonic existence. But I want to ask, to you, is he a good father? Who would have thought that after hearing this? The queen hesitated for a moment, probably about the same as other fathers. And in that moment, the king understood. Talking with you does not seem so bad after all. From now on, I will come here often. The matter of the emperor and queen sharing a bed spread through the court in the blink of an eye, and now the situation had become even more complicated. Now the only awkward ones were those who stood on Roden's side. Several nobles who had previously remained neutral had, in these past few days, one after another gone over to the duke. It seems the duke used the version most favorable to himself and spread the rumors. His moves are indeed fast. But your Majesty, did you not say you wanted to make use of the queen? But now it looks instead as though you are the one being used. Perhaps the most dangerous person is precisely you. Judging by the current wind before the court, it is even possible that the imperial consort may be deposed. In the current standoff, if either the duke or I moves troops first, that will be civil war. Neither of us wants to go that far, which is why we are both eager to seize a justification. And the only person who can give me that justification is the queen, at least before the court. That is how the situation stands. Are you truly certain the queen can help you? But what is important is to turn this matter into an established fact. For the time being, the duke's family will not make a move against the imperial consort. So, Marquis, you need not worry. Go settle the remaining nobles and the merchant guild first. The Marquis is always like this. No wonder the nobles all lean toward the duke. I even think the Roden family ought to be reduced to count. But the Roden family controls most of the agricultural export trade, so how could they be demoted so easily? Before Cloyson was established, there were 5 founding leaders who led Cloyson. Although Anson was reduced to count, the might of his descendants has still not diminished even to this day. And under such circumstances, Cloyton and Roden have joined forces. One day, those nobles who remain neutral will also make a choice between the two sides. When that time comes, the duke will also use force compulsorily. But fortunately, near Drull territory there is also Markia. As long as the border count remains neutral, Drull will not dare send troops lightly. And it is said that the border count is a very reasonable person. But these words caused the king to sink into memory. After being kidnapped by Duke Drull, he had once escaped there. From only that brief exchange with the border count, the king had already understood that she would not help me. The relationship with the king had only just eased a little, yet he was threatened by the duke again. Why did it have to be today of all days? After learning that the border count would not help him, the king thought again of Duke Denaya. But until now, a full 10 years had passed without anyone seeing her. Some said she had gone mad, and some said she had in fact died long ago. Only no one said it outright, but the more credible version was obviously the latter. I have my own judgment. The imperial consort only needs to do what the imperial consort ought to do. During Alba Ring Day, keep a close eye on the queen, and continue to investigate every clue related to that matter. Your Majesty, I have been asking through the National Merchant Guild all along, but up to now, still no one has been able to return alive from the Dark Forest. At the very least, we should first find that brooch. The Duke does not know of its existence. Besides, it is an imperial object enchanted with ancient magic and simply cannot be destroyed. But if we do not search Drull territory directly, it is difficult to draw a conclusion. The imperial consort let out a soft sigh. Your Majesty the Queen, what is wrong? She simply does not trust me. But the imperial consort believed that all this was only because they had spent too little time together. You absolutely must spend more time with her, at least twice a week. If you go at night, that would be even better, because the night is most likely to awaken the emotions deep in a person's heart. The butler had only just left here when Duke Drull again requested an audience. The scene of these two meeting was Jane truly especially spectacular. Then, what matter has brought the Duke to see me? Since I have already returned, I ask that your Majesty reopen the House of Nobles as soon as possible. Looking at his arrogant and conceited expression, it was as if he had already secretly drafted a plan to abolish the imperial consort. Every time I see the Duke, the same thought comes to mind. You really are hard to kill. The Duke came to see the king here. Seeing this, The king suddenly spoke. Indeed, after all, even hell would not welcome you. The Duke also responded in kind. Who else could understand your Majesty's feelings at this moment better than I do? Because I too had not expected that your Majesty's life would be this long. Even the smiles of these two carried a strange kind of tacit understanding. The Duke's smile is truly disgusting to the extreme. When I was young, I was once deceived by that smile. I even mistakenly thought that the Duke liked me. At one point, I even regarded him as my grandfather, who died young. But now I know very clearly that the Duke's smile is nothing more than an exquisitely crafted mask that sends chills down one's spine. So, even if you want me to reopen the House of Nobles as soon as possible, I cannot possibly let you manipulate me unconditionally. As long as you stop meddling with Roden's Merchant Guild, I will reopen the House of Nobles. But do I really have to do that? In any case, after 30 days, Your Majesty will have no choice but to reopen it as well. Isn't it precisely because you are afraid that I might come up with some countermeasure within these 30 days that you specially came to urge me? I advise you to stop while you still can. If we continue this stalemate, it will only be a waste of time. In the end, didn't you target the Merchant Guild because you wanted something from me? But as long as Your Majesty agrees to one more condition of mine, I will no longer touch the Merchant Guild. As expected, I knew you would definitely bring up another condition. If the throne could truly be seized through greed, then you would already be the emperor of this continent. Your Majesty, you already spent the night in the Empress's palace before, so next time, how about choosing the annex of the main palace? And I hope it can be as soon as possible. The Empress only wanted to see her mother once, yet she was threatened by the Duke into sleeping with the king. Here, the Duke proposed that the next time the king spends the night with the Empress, it could be changed to the annex of the main palace. What? Do you think this would make it easier to manipulate public opinion? It rather looks as though I have tacitly accepted that reluctant compromise between you and the Empress. This is merely the proper rule to begin with. Even explaining it to you like this makes me feel somewhat embarrassed. As long as the matter of the royal special chamber is settled, I will also do what I ought to do. But do not think that placing your daughter by my side means you can rest easy. The Empress may indeed be incomparably precious to you, but in the end, she is not my person. So I hope you always remember that the person you treasure like a jewel is now in my hands. Your Majesty, those words are a bit too naive. Did the late emperor and late empress cast you aside so ruthlessly because they did not cherish you? No, it was simply because they had something more important than your Majesty. If one is not the most precious one, then it means nothing. What you say makes it sound as though the Empress means nothing to you. What I mean is that sometimes the situation can also change, and your Majesty understands this in your heart as well. Does he not? Why did the late emperor and late empress teach your Majesty so strictly? It was because you resemble your grandfather too much, namely the previous emperor. The late emperor and late empress were afraid of repeating the same mistake. Your Majesty may think that you are different from that man. Unfortunately, you are not. You simply have not yet encountered the trigger that would drive you mad with love, such as the nature of your bloodline. And my daughter also has my blood flowing through her veins. If by any chance my daughter were also to become someone like me, how heartbreaking that would be. After the king and the Duke finished talking here, he actually directly told Gordon to clean up the royal special chamber, and to clean it so thoroughly that not even the slightest trace of someone having died there could be left behind. Then the Duke went to see the Empress again. That night, the Emperor did not touch you. Did he? What did he say? He only said that he did not want to hate me. He has truly been driven into a corner. Very well, you should also go and see your mother. It would not be good for your mother not to have seen you for too long. It is just that your mother cannot come to the capital, so you can only make a trip to Drull. But the Empress had only just said that she was willing to go, when the Duke suddenly said, "Would His Majesty the Emperor allow you to go to such a distant place? You are an empress without children yet, and Drull is far away and also close to the national border. So His Majesty will not easily permit you to go. Moreover, how would you properly explain the reason for going to Drull? To the outside world, your mother is my wife who was buried long ago. If you say you are traveling all the way to Drull to visit the deceased, would the Emperor agree?" The Empress could only look at the Duke with an anxious face. How dull. What I mean is, since the Emperor's permission is needed, then you should find a way to obtain his consent yourself. In a few days, the Emperor will summon you to the royal special chamber, just as he himself said. He seems to intend to acknowledge that you are the Empress and give you the treatment you deserve, so you absolutely must not miss this opportunity. You should at least be capable of that much. Here, the Emperor sent flowers to the Empress again, but the Empress simply could not feel happy at all. When she heard that these flowers had been forced into bloom by magic, the Empress immediately understood that the flowers must once again have been sent at his instruction through someone else. Here, the Empress saw, at a glance, that the flowers sent by the king had not been delivered personally by him, and since then, his shadow had not been seen at all. You only want to make use of me, don't you, Your Majesty? Here, the steward passed a message to the king saying, "The entire Empress's palace is already filled with the flowers Your Majesty sent, so presumably there is no need to send more. You have worked hard delivering flowers for me during this time, Gordon." The king tightly closed his eyes. Just as Duke Drull said, the Duke's blood flows in her veins. Every time I meet the Duke, I do not know how to face the Empress's face again. Since I said that I would give the Empress the treatment she deserves, I cannot truly stand by and do nothing. But in the end, the method I racked my brains to come up with was merely sending gifts. And in another 3 days, I have to go to the royal special chamber. Who would have thought that at that moment, a voice suddenly rang out. I already told you, as long as Gordon is here, you do not need to climb in through the window. It is also just in case. And besides, I am already used to it. This time I was away for rather a long time. After all, what your majesty asked me to keep an eye on was not only Verney. Arthur is an orphan of war slaves whom the king brought back from Manhwa in his youth. There are some things I will not tell Gordon, and he is the only one who knows these things. There is no movement on Verney's side. It is very calm. Their military strength remains as usual, and there is absolutely no sign of preparing for war. Very strange. Verney has always been a country that constantly carries out military provocations against Cloison, and in addition to the last war, they have already formed a grudge with l'Artois. Their current situation ought not to be very good. Jane truly seems to be deliberately putting on a show for outsiders to see. Arthur stared at the king. Are you not going to ask anything else? Here. The king sent Arthur to investigate, but although he searched all along the area around the border, he still never found it. And those places did not even include Drull, not only the actual site of the incident. Even the innocent surrounding villages were brutally slaughtered by the Duke. And what was left in the end was that dark forest. No one can thoroughly investigate that place. Even Arthur cannot enter it. Who would have expected that after hearing this, the king suddenly stood up? What exactly does this mean? Because that place had blood clan magic cast on it. Only the direct blood relatives of Drull can step inside. And the mage who casts the spell does not necessarily need to be blood-related. As long as they possess the blood of the family head, other mages can also perform the spell. However, a certain amount of Clova blood must be mixed into it. Among the royal families of all the countries on the continent, all are descendants of the first-generation ancestors, but the true direct line of Cloison's founder, Clova, is not Croisillon, but Drull. And this is precisely the beginning of the war between Drull and Croisillon. But the magic forbidding entry and exit there may not necessarily mean that something is hidden there. I have seen many similar places since childhood. In any case, I think your majesty should stop looking. Whether there or in the surrounding area, nothing was left behind. That person is already dead, but no corpse was found, and everything was also burned down. Yet the king still believed that child had merely escaped to another place. But 10 years have already passed, and basically nothing will change anymore. But the king still firmly believed that everything would change. After Arthur left, the king's resolute gaze never wavered. Here, the king heard a strange rumor. They all say that I have been blinded by you. That is because after officially spending the night in the royal special chamber, Her Majesty the Empress's status will no longer be the same as before, so the imperial consort must also find a way out for herself. And ever since she became the imperial consort, she has never brought any loss to your majesty either. Yet the king appeared somewhat absent-minded. Then the imperial consort suddenly spoke, mentioning that brooch in the box which your majesty once mentioned to me. I found someone who recognized it. He is a man who once did jewelry business in Drull. He went to Manhwa 14 years ago, and only recently came back. It was he who bought that brooch 14 years ago. It was brought to be sold by a thin and ragged child. Seeing the child's appearance, he thought the brooch was fake. Although he cannot remember too clearly, he remembers that the child's name was only a single character, with no surname, and that it was raining that day, and the child also bought a lot of Ontua stones. The king suddenly clenched his water cup tightly. What did that matter end up becoming afterward? The imperial consort said that she heard from that soldier that the child was no longer around. It was said that the child had become involved in a crime. Even the entire village was burned down together. It was said that even the corpses were piled together and burned to ashes. Who would have thought that in the next second, the water cup in the king's hand shattered on the spot. After that, without even having time to straighten his robe, he was about to leave first. The steward was still worried about the king's health, thinking that the matter of the royal special envoy should be postponed for now. Who would have thought that the king would say, seriously, I am fine, so there is no need to delay it. The king had never been able to accept that obsession that had lasted 14 years. Then he came to the door of the royal special chamber. The king, who had originally looked gloomy,
But when he saw the empress,
his face actually lit up. Here, the king even ignored the empress's greeting and suddenly sat down by the bed. He even said that he wanted to lie down first. Before long, the sound of his snoring could be heard. This whole string of actions directly startled the empress. Could it be that a healer has to be summoned again? But does being with me really make you feel this awful? Who would have thought that the king actually saw his mother in a dream? He dreamed that she was sternly scolding him. The duke must be so delighted he cannot stop smiling now. With just one poison, he can get rid of both me and the royal child in my womb at once. It is because you came back alive that the duke has completely gone mad. All of this is because of you. Who would have thought that Lillian would suddenly call out to stop him? But before Carl could react, Lillian suddenly fell into a pool of blood. The king suddenly woke up with a start, still continuously calling out Lu's name. But when he looked up at the empress, what appeared before his eyes was the image of his deceased mother. The king's Adam's apple bobbed. He hurriedly pushed open the door of the special chamber and warned the attendants that no one was allowed to follow. But the empress looked full of pain. Just now, the one you clearly called was my name. Here. The empress followed the king to the stone statue. Who would have thought that when the king turned to look at the empress, he actually mistook her for Lu in his days, accompanied by a wave of intense pain. The king also fell to his knees before the empress. I should not have left her there alone. I should not have left her there. I harmed her. I am sorry, Lu. The empress looked distressed. You have already grown so much that I can no longer hold you, but why are you still trapped in that memory? I am clearly right here. I am still alive, right in front of you. The king and the empress finally met in the garden, but because of his longing, the king mistook the empress for Lu. He painfully collapsed into the empress's arms on his knees. Everything he said was an apology to Lu. This also made the empress unable to stop her tears from falling. After the king opened his eyes, he had already awakened in the royal special chamber. The first thing that came to his mind after sitting up was where Yvonne was. You fainted yesterday. I already told you that yesterday was far too forced. It was precisely because you took an excessive amount of sedatives that you fainted. How is it that recently you understand moderation less and less? Must even I be gone before your majesty comes to his senses? Who would have thought that the empress's face would flash through the king's mind again? Which side was the dream, and which side was reality? Then the steward suddenly said, "Why were you crying like that yesterday?" At the moment when the king showed confusion and froze, the king suddenly remembered last night's scene. His face also reddened along with it. You would not let us follow, so no one saw what happened, but even from a distance, it was possible to guess that you were crying. And Her Majesty the Empress was indeed very unusual last night as well. Leaving that aside, I truly cannot understand why Her Majesty the Empress cried so sorrowfully. Even the king was somewhat surprised upon hearing this. To be honest, Her Majesty the Empress has always looked very cold and heartless. But seeing the Empress crying together with you, I even felt that perhaps she is more emotional than we thought. In any case, Her Majesty the Empress did not say a single word and left at dawn. And I have already made the others keep their mouths shut as well. Seeing that the king did not speak, the steward withdrew first. What happened yesterday was actually not a dream. What is the meaning of apologizing to an unrelated person? She has long since ceased to exist. If there is no Lu, what am I supposed to do from now on? Inside the imperial hall, the paper before the king had long since been soaked through with ink. Arthur's appearance also startled the king for a moment. Seriously, if this were a battlefield, with His Majesty this distracted, his head would already be gone. The king could tell at a glance that Arthur had not come for idle chatter this time. It turned out that the old man had asked the king to go to the queen's palace in the afternoon. But why did he have to go, of all things? Everyone said that His Majesty hated the queen very much, and the queen also hated His Majesty very much. But no matter how much they hated each other, something still had to be done in the end. Arthur wore a smug expression. Could it be because you cried in front of the queen yesterday? So now you want to shut her mouth? Arthur saw that the king did not respond. Then can I go to the queen's palace too? I still haven't seen the queen, so I'm rather curious. And besides, I'm very bored right now. Who would have thought that after hearing this, the king immediately tensed up. In his heart, he was 10,000 times unwilling. You don't need to see her. Stay honestly in the emperor's palace. Arthur looked at the king's expression. He even began to wonder whether the king really hated the queen or not. Although it was still a bit early, the king still decided to head straight to the queen's palace. But as soon as the king arrived, he heard a burst of commotion coming from inside. It sounded as if someone had been hurt. When the king went in to look, he found the queen sitting weakly on the sofa. The king immediately frowned. Then he hurried forward to the queen. Stop, queen, what exactly are you doing? Is self-harm your hobby? Every single time, you put on that look as if none of this has anything to do with you. Who would have thought that halfway through speaking, the king suddenly stopped? Yes, even if one said she was mad, it did not seem strange at all. Here, the king took the initiative to come see the queen. The king looked at the girl before him, but I still cannot help wondering, is she really the one who was crying yesterday? Why do I think of Lu when I look at this face? They clearly do not resemble each other in the slightest. The king had just wanted to bring up last night's matter, but the queen said, "Please don't mind it. I have already forgotten." Her expression was as calm as if there were no ripples at all. But why is it that I can never forget that tear of hers? Queen, why did you do that? That one sentence directly left the queen dumbfounded. I merely had a dream. Without realizing it, the king had actually asked some utterly meaningless questions. Here, the queen had something to say to the king. If your majesty permits it, I would like to make a trip to the Droll territory. Those words made the king somewhat puzzled. It turned out the queen wanted to visit her mother's grave. Recently, my mother has kept appearing in my dreams, making me uneasy, and I miss her very much. Although father says it is nothing, I still want to go and see it myself. The queen looked at the king with a pitiful expression. But the journey to the Droll territory was long, and the one-way trip alone would take 10 days. However, if magic stones were used, it should be faster. Just as the king learned that the duke would also be accompanying her, the king's expression immediately darkened. If you can return within 2 weeks, I will allow you to go. The queen had not expected that he would agree so readily. Her face instantly flushed red, and that layer of coldness from before seemed to disappear at once. Who would have thought that when the king saw this, even his eyes lit up. The tea in his hand spilled all over the floor as well. Fortunately, The butler beside him reminded him. Seeing this, the king quickly gave 2 light coughs. However, I also have one condition. Here. The king agreed to the queen's request, but he also put forward one condition, namely that you must take the guards I assigned to you. As for the candidates, the king had his own arrangements. Looking at the queen like this, the king felt that even if he sent a beggar over, she would agree. Still, she was rather cute. Who would have thought that the king suddenly paused and said, "I hope that what happened yesterday will not reach the duke's ears." Of course, the queen would not tell even this kind of thing, but there are some things that even if I do not say them, he will still know. On this point, there is nothing I can do. After the king left, the queen still limped behind him to see him off. Your foot is injured too, so there is no need to come out to see me off, queen. The king had given her so many gifts before, yet she had remained unmoved. But merely allowing her to return to Droll was enough. I am going to summon Arthur immediately, and also send word to the Duke to come see me within today. In the Emperor's office. I have told you many times already, if you want to sit, then sit in a chair. Didn't you say you were bored before? Then go to Droll again. This time you are to go deep into the dark forest. Go together with Droll, and then you will be able to enter. I appoint you as the Queen's guard. In name you are a guard, but your true duty is to monitor the Duke and the Queen. You are to gather as much intelligence as possible. But who would have known that Arthur said instead, once someone is dead, they are dead, and nothing can be undone. The king suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. Didn't I tell you to go back and find that child? Yes. Please hurry and prepare to depart. After so long, I should have let go of Lu, but this is not something I can control. If Lu really was killed by the Duke, then what exactly am I supposed to do? There is only one reason I have been able to endure these 14 years. On the swaying carriage, the queen had not expected that she could only see her mother once a year. This time, she was so excited that she did not even sleep well. The Duke heard that the king had sent a guard. Although he appeared somewhat irritated on the surface, he did not seem to take any action either, because in his eyes, it was merely a trivial guard. Because Droll was a place where the Duke controlled everything. The queen looked at the castle, and her heartbeat quickened more and more. Just as she thought she would be able to see her mother at any moment, the Duke suddenly grabbed her and said, "You must not disrupt the order." What he meant was that she had to see the magician first before she could see her mother. He really left no loopholes at all. But just as the queen was about to head to her room, Arthur suddenly stepped in and blocked her way. Arthur followed the queen all the way into the castle. "I am going inside to change clothes. Are you still going to follow me in and watch? At most, I will allow you to stand at the door. In any case, all kinds of magic have been cast over my room, so it will be difficult for him to find anything out." Who would have thought that suddenly a voice came? "Long time no see, miss. This time, you have even brought back trouble with you." The queen had just wanted to speak, but he suddenly interrupted her. "I know that you also want to get this over with as soon as possible, miss. So, let's skip the pleasantries. You are somewhat different from 6 months ago. Back then, you were like someone who never spoke at all. Your mind was also very clean, so there was no need for me to do anything. It seems that during this time you have tried quite a lot, but you do not need to be afraid either. I will not tell the Duke, but you would also do best not to make pointless resistance. Your mother is still alive. Is it not still too early for you to be entertaining improper thoughts now?" Here, the queen finally welcomed the chance to see her mother. And in the most remote part of the Duke's residence, there was a tower that hid 2 secrets unknown to others. One was the coffin placed on the very top floor, containing his daughter, the real Yvonne. The other was my mother Denise, who lived on the floor below. Without the Duke's permission, no one could enter this tower. For this reason, the Duke had used his own blood to cast many spells here. Seeing that Arthur had no intention of leaving, the queen added, "This is only the place where my mother's remains are enshrined. I am merely going in to pray quietly for a while, and I will come out soon. If you keep acting like this, I can only assume that besides your duty as a guard, you have other motives." The moment the queen pushed open the door, she saw Jane. As mother and daughter looked at each other, the queen instantly threw herself into her mother's arms. Looking at each other's gaunt faces, tears slid down from the corners of their eyes. "Had I known it would be like this, then no matter how far away you were married off, even if I had died on the road, I should have followed you there." At this moment, the queen wished more than anything that time could stop right here. But Arthur outside looked somewhat helpless. "There are clearly windows, yet I cannot see inside. So many strange and messy spells have been cast here. This place is obviously highly suspicious. Every time I come to the Droll territory, I feel an ominous aura, especially this Duke's residence. It gives off a strong aura of death." After Arthur saw Jane come out, he immediately jumped down. "You are His Majesty the Emperor's guard, aren't you? His Majesty said that she will sleep here tonight, so please find another place to rest as a guard." Is she going to sleep with a corpse? To be precise, not a corpse, but ashes. When His Majesty used to live here, she often did this as well. Sure enough, this place is very strange. Here, the king sat where he was. Who would have thought that Lu suddenly slapped him? "Why are you so absent-minded? What are you doing?" Only then did the king realize that this should be a dream, and he even hoped that he would never wake up. "That day should have ended my life. It was because of you that my life was able to continue. Without you, what meaning would there be in my being alive?" Who would have thought that Yvonne suddenly appeared before the king's eyes? He abruptly woke up and said, "I am a madman. not some adolescent boy. Yet for several days in a row, I have been having dreams like this. If I had not seen her like that, I would not be having such dreams. It's just that, though she is clearly that duke's daughter, why did she cry like that day? And for some reason, from that day on, I could no longer see the duke's shadow on Yvonne. Yvonne is clearly not here, yet I feel as though she is everywhere. Here, the king called Gordon over. You only arranged a small number of guards, right? If your majesty is referring to Saint Soda, I have already conveyed your majesty's verbal instructions to them that your majesty wishes to rest there. Because Lesotho has beautiful scenery, the Cloyson royal family also often comes there to recuperate.
Gordon suddenly said,
Duke Denaya? Are you going to visit Duke Denaya? How do you know Denaya is there? Even Drull does not know about this matter. Your majesty, before serving you, I also served 2 emperors. The one who secretly carried out this matter back then was precisely me. It's just that Duke Denaya regarded his younger sister, the late Empress Adelaide, as if she were his own child. So ever since she passed away, Duke Denaya seems to have gone out of his mind as well. After so many years, the emperor still cannot let go of Lu. Without her, the emperor does not even have a reason to go on living. Here, the king arrived at his destination. Denaya had also long been waiting there. The butler was somewhat surprised at the sight. Hadn't the rumors said that she was somewhat insane? I had thought that your majesty would never come here. Do you still remember what I told you? If you do not abandon that child, then do not come looking for me. Was everything your highness has done not because Drull threw Cloyson into chaos? Then I am afraid I cannot go with your majesty. Just like your highness's grandfather. The goal of his entire life was only for one person. You used to always look as though you feared neither life nor death. But seeing that you are still alive, it seems that child has not died yet. How strange. The one who died in your majesty's place was clearly Adelaide. Yet your majesty feels deep guilt toward a rustic child whose name you do not even know. Those simply cannot be compared, can they? Mother neither wanted to save me nor wanted to die in my place. It was only because she was unlucky that she unfortunately died in my stead. When your majesty was kidnapped, the former empress gave up on you and chose the heir in her womb instead. Just as your majesty said, her death was merely bad luck. Who could have imagined that Drull, who never used poison to kill, would suddenly go mad and poison someone? But since you are supposedly so rational, you still wagered your life on a wild child you had only known for 2 weeks. You truly are exactly the same as the previous generation's emperor. How could you be shaken just because of the kindness of a rustic child? You even made up your mind to become emperor for the sake of a mere little country girl. As for why you came to find me today, I have already made myself very clear. The Duke had just wanted to bring up that child, but the king said, that child is already gone. It seems Drull got rid of that child. Do you still want revenge? Then, after your goal is achieved, what then? Are you going to kill yourself? Without her, do you really have no reason to keep living? After learning of the king's feelings, the Duke became completely agitated. Do you know that Cloyton's collateral line is Drull? Right now, there is no heir, which is why I came to find you, is it not? I absolutely cannot tolerate Drull ascending the throne. So we should get rid of Drull first, shouldn't we? I know that all thoughts and actions cannot revolve around only one person. Do you not know that Cloyson needs you even more than I do? Using me as an excuse to flee here. I am afraid that is not Denaya's style either, is it? Of course, I did not come to forcibly take you away either. I plan to hand over part of the imperial power to the House of Lords. What do you think? That way, at least Cloyson will not fall into the abyss because of the Emperor's arbitrary decisions. Then please grant me the authority to deal with Drull. Please allow me, according to my own wishes, to eliminate him and the entire Drull family. Nothing else matters. But Duke Drull, I want to execute him personally. I do not know what else there is worth clinging to besides that. By the way, Drull's daughter is the queen, isn't she? Then please give me the authority to deal with Drull's daughter as well. I know well how much Drull dotes on his daughter. If I can make him also taste the feeling of losing a loved one, that seems not bad either. Seeing this, the king appeared somewhat hesitant. The Duke also did not intend to kill her immediately. However, after seeing your reaction, I want that authority even more instead. It seems that Drull's daughter has successfully bewitched someone during this time. Otherwise, you would have no reason to refuse, would you? Drull will be dealt with by your majesty, but his daughter, you must hand her over to me. At last, the king made up his mind to hand the queen over to the Duke for execution, even if the price was Yvonne's life. Within the territory of Pyrrole, during this period, the Empress was always unwilling to leave the tower where her mother was. If it weren't for that guy, following me the whole way and pestering me with questions, and being so sharp-eyed and quick-handed, why would he care so much about that tower? Are there really corpses in the tower? If there are only corpses inside, why make such a huge fuss over it? The Empress turned her head and said, "What do you mean by that? As long as one is human, everyone wants to stay by their family's side, whether alive or after death." After hearing this, Maha looked completely confused. I don't have any family. I don't understand. So Carl had brought this child to Maha. I heard he used to be a slave, and everyone says Maha drives slaves in the cruelest way possible. But now, isn't his majesty your family? He sent you to be my guard. In my view, he relies on you very much. Maha suddenly stammered, Won't you go take a look around the territory? An empress entangled in scandal. What face do I have to go out? But you are only a guard, so why are you interested in this kind of thing? Although I had long known that he had been sent here to watch me, he must have received other orders as well. What exactly was His Majesty's order? If you are willing to tell the truth, I will consider it, and I will not tell father. From the moment I started suspecting you, you were already finished. At this point, I think you'd better try to persuade me instead. Seeing that Maha had no reaction at all, the Empress turned and walked toward the room. He hurriedly stopped the Empress. His Majesty is very curious about the Dark Forest. He wants to know why it is sealed off so tightly. And this matter is not because of the Duke. Then what exactly does Carloy want to find there? The Empress finally learned the king's secret. He had been investigating the Dark Forest all along. But when the Empress recalled the past, a sudden stabbing pain came from her chest. When the Empress first learned of it, she was full of doubt. Why would His Majesty be curious about these things? The Duke does not allow anyone to step into the place where the real Yvonne died, only because of the Duke's almost mad obsession. There is nothing there, and in that place, there is nothing that could be used against my father. But then Maha said it was not because of the Duke. If not because of the Duke, then what exactly was Carloy looking for? Scenes from the past kept flashing through the Empress's mind. Impossible. More than 10 years have already passed. He couldn't still be searching for Lu. It has been 14 years. There is no reason for him to still remember those trivial promises. If I want to know what Carloy really wants, I can only take him to the Dark Forest myself. But aside from the Duke's residence, I cannot move freely anywhere else. The Empress turned and said, I'll think about it again. This place really seems suspicious everywhere. Meanwhile, Yvonne was sitting beside her mother. I had thought that even if I were not by her side, mother would still be doing well. It turns out I was wrong.
It is all my fault.
I don't know when I will be able to return to Drull again. Can mother hold on until the moment everything ends? Whether Carloy wins in the end, or the Duke. This struggle must end before mother's body completely deteriorates. Mother, I will end all of this as soon as possible, so hold on a little longer. Judging from experience so far, relying only on the Duke's fickleness and that tiny bit of pitiful goodwill is simply not enough to guarantee mother's safety. Then what about Carloy? If he defeats the Duke, will he protect mother and me? The Empress, who had originally been very resistant to Arthur, actually took the initiative to propose taking him to the Dark Forest. At this moment, the Empress still could not determine the king's true intentions, so she had to find out what Carloy truly wanted. Arthur, I will take you to the Dark Forest, she said to the butler. I want to go out around the territory.
Prepare a carriage for me.
But the Drull territory is too dangerous for you. The head butler of the Duke of Drull's residence, among this mansion's servants, almost all of them had been replaced, but he was one of the few who had been kept, and the only one loyal to the Duke. With one of His Majesty's guards accompanying me, Father will understand as well. If you really feel uneasy about it, then after I return, just inform Father. Hearing this, the butler had no choice. Then I will go prepare the carriage at once. The carriage ride is bumpy, but why would the Duke's daughter go this far? And then there was the eerie atmosphere of the Duke's residence. You should know this, right? In that place, apart from those who inherit Drull blood, no one else can enter. You must understand, only by making contact with me can you cross the barrier. After the carriage came to a stop, they also arrived before the entrance to the barrier. The Empress stretched out her hand. Arthur also carefully placed his hand over hers. Then let us go in. Look around as you please. Many corpses were burned here. After the corpses were piled together, they were burned with a single fire. Since there is nothing here, then why hide it away? I heard that day was the day after Storm. The Duchess of Drull seemed to feel extreme shame over the Duke fathering an illegitimate daughter after marriage, and over the fact that after learning of the illegitimate daughter's existence, he still did not immediately get rid of her. So, in order to see with her own eyes me, this illegitimate daughter, and my mother, she actually brought her daughter Yvonne and entered the Dark Forest together. But no one had expected that my mother and I, the Duchess and her daughter, and the Duke of Drull would all, because of this choice, meet an incomparably cruel fate. Pressed by the Empress, Arthur finally said that what the king had been searching for many years was a person. Inside the Dark Forest, the Empress repeated the question from before once again. Seeing that Arthur remained silent for a long time and still did not speak, the Empress stepped out of the Dark Forest.
Do you know?
Without me, you would never be able to get out of here. I will regretfully inform His Majesty that you failed to come back alive. As for the graveyard, there is no need to worry. Every inch of this land is a grave for the dead. Arthur shouted behind her. A person? It's a person. His Majesty, he is looking for a person. The Empress was just about to ask how long he had been searching, but after thinking about it, she let it go. So, what His Majesty asked you to find was only a person? Seeing that Arthur still did not answer, how pitiful. In the future, His Majesty will have to be all alone. Hearing this, Arthur trembled all over and said, and a brooch. The Empress understood at once. She suddenly drew a dagger and cut her own hand in one stroke. To strengthen the barrier, let this count as an injury you inflicted. You are unwilling? Haven't I done all this so that you can report to His Majesty that the Empress is highly suspicious? Who do you think you are? There should be many people shaping you. His Majesty's man, Mahesmand, a knight.
Ator, Zoami.
I am not only the daughter of Drull. Meanwhile, The Duke demanded that the Empress explain herself. It was that guard being unreasonable. He said that if I did not take him to the Dark Forest, he would report to His Imperial Majesty that the Drull Tower was suspicious. The magic cast on the tower is something Cloyson does not possess. Even if the Emperor knew, he could do nothing. I had originally intended to trap that guard in the Dark Forest and leave him to fend for himself, but he was not as stupid as I thought. After noticing something was wrong, he injured me. In order to cover up the fact that he wounded the Empress, he probably will not dare speak carelessly anymore. However, they will be even more vigilant from now on. Here, the Empress said to the Duke, "The longer Mother and I are apart, the worse her condition seems to become." But unexpectedly, the Duke said, "Then do you know what my wish is? To become Emperor. Isn't it?" The Emperor let out a cold laugh. "Even now, you still do not know what you are supposed to do."
That truly surprises me.
For this entire year, haven't I told you again and again to win his favor and preferably become pregnant with his child? I think that rather than doing that, it would be faster to get rid of the Emperor directly. That is the part one should strive for. You only need to do your own part well. As long as you bear a child with that man, then my heir will at the same time also possess Cloyson blood. As long as we wait until that day, I will let you and your mother live a lifetime free from want, safe and secure, enjoying your lives. Ever since meeting Duke Donghua, His Majesty has become somewhat strange. It is as if he personally threw away something very important. Rumor has it that the Duke is out of his mind, but in my view, he has not changed at all. The Duke is no longer the Duke she once was either. After staring at the water in the Shoujo Palace for 10 years, how could she possibly still be the same as before? Not long ago, he was still desperately trying to turn things around. So has His Majesty let go because he obtained Donghua? After the king returned here, Your Majesty, why did you personally come out to welcome me today? My father contacted me and said that the customers of the Merchant Guild have been stabilized again. Drull must have made a move, but after hearing this, the king still remained absent-minded. Your Majesty, forgive my boldness. May we talk about serious matters? Seeing that the king still did not respond, the imperial consort's expression turned grave. I am talking about the Empress. The king's expression changed instantly. What happened to the Empress? Here, the imperial consort gave the king an idea. Have you ever liked someone before? You could try thinking of the Empress as that person. That way, it might seem more sincere. But just as the imperial consort was about to continue, she saw the king staring at her coldly. The imperial consort froze on the spot, so she hurriedly bowed and withdrew. What exactly happened in the Shoujo Palace? How has he seemingly become a completely different person? Here, the king sat in the chair, truly wanting to give up all of this. But even so, I am still preparing for what is to come. It seems that Donghwa's blood really does flow within me. Although I have never possessed freedom, still, I have finally let go of the hidden burden that has weighed on my heart for so many years. It seems that matter was, for me, the final straw that crushed everything. On the Empress's side, she will be leaving tomorrow. The Duke said there are still matters in the territory that need to be handled. Mother, please endure a little longer. This year, I will definitely return to the territory. Here, while the king was asleep, he unexpectedly dreamed of Lu and of the Empress disappearing completely before his eyes. The king was so frightened that he suddenly jolted awake. What kind of dream was that? On the Empress's side, she also dreamed of Carl. The young Carl kept running in search of Lu, never once stopping. That persistence of his was heartbreaking, but Carloy had never been willing to listen to advice. I suddenly became a little curious. Just how much did you want me that you still have not given up even now? You are still continuing to search for me. I still have my mother, but by your side, who is left? Here, the Empress returned to the palace. The king had already been waiting there for a long time, but at the moment their eyes met, the king suddenly thought of that dream, and his face turned red as well. Here, the king received Yvonne, but did not step forward. Instead, he turned and left directly. Seeing this, the Empress felt miserable. Even if I personally came out to welcome you, are you unwilling to face me for even a moment? After Arthur went to the Dark Forest, there was indeed nothing left there but ruins, and the brooch was not found either. Hearing this, the king was disappointed to the extreme as well. There is also a tower in the ducal residence. It is said that the Duchess's body is kept inside, but the Empress eats and sleeps there. That should not be a body, but ashes. When my father was alive, he was even more excessive than this. That tower is also very strange. Many high-level spells have been cast there, and no one other than Drull can enter. Only one person can enter. Who would have thought that Arthur would complain to the king? The Empress coerced me into extracting information, and then inexplicably cut her own hand, making me take the blame, yet she did not continue pressing the matter. Moreover, the atmosphere between the ducal residence and the Empress is also very subtle. Isn't the Empress very favored by the Duke? But I feel that she is not that beloved there, and things between her and the Duke also seem somewhat awkward. She also said that she is not only Drull's daughter. After 2 returns, the Empress was still wavering between Carloy and the Duke, but in the end leaned toward Carloy. Who would have thought that the Empress would suddenly stop, look at the flowers before her, and think of the past again? But when the Imperial consort bent down to look, she was cut by the shattered floor. It was not until a sharp pain came from my fingertip that I suddenly came back to my senses. No matter which side I choose, I must become the most crucial chess piece. Who knew that the king would suddenly appear before her? When he saw that the Empress's hand was bleeding, the king's gaze could not help but tremble. Why are you always so careless? If not your foot, then your hand, or else your finger. Why are you always so unwilling to cherish your own body? The king grabbed the Empress in one swift motion. His hand was very hot, and his gaze was no longer as cold as before. The king said that sentence again, the one he had said before. A person who ignores their own wounds is a person who does not love themselves. At the time, the Empress had not asked curiously, "Wasn't your majesty also someone who would ignore his own wounds? You were still so young then, so how did you know these things? Could it be that back then, there was not even a single person who could understand your pain, and that was why you wanted so badly to give up? If even you cannot obtain happiness, then I truly have no confidence to endure all of this." Then the king suddenly came back to his senses. "Are you planning to come out for a walk on a rainy day? It seems I did not come at the right time today." The Empress remembered that in Pultu, there were many rumors saying that the emperor did not like rainy days. Your every move remained on that day. Until now. Here, the king convened a meeting of the nobles. "I heard that the relationship between the Empress and His Majesty has eased quite a bit recently. It seems His Majesty has finally compromised with Duke Donghua. Aren't all of you already very clear about the regulations regarding the selection of the President of the House of Nobles? Duke Donghua has not attended the House of Nobles for 10 years. And just as the House of Nobles was preparing to decide that Duke Droll would continue his reappointment this year, accompanied by the king's cold sneer, a figure also appeared before everyone. Your Majesty, because I was recuperating from an old illness, I returned late. Please forgive me for not arriving until now. Now then, let us decide the election date for the President of the House of Nobles. Today, only the election date for the President of the House of Nobles was set. But when that day arrives, no one can say for certain what the situation will become. I never expected that you would still be alive." And just as the Duke mocked her, the scene suddenly shifted. "You have committed too many sins. You will not even be able to see your dead wife again. Unable to meet even after death. You truly are a pitiful man. Hans, I came to fulfill the promise from 10 years ago. Seeing how radiant you look, it seems that in the days I was away, you have been doing quite well." After hearing this, the Duke completely broke down. "Bastard, Donghua, I cannot lose to them again like last time. I must find a way that will absolutely not fail. Here." The king summoned Donghua over. He spoke in a heavy tone. "You knew Droll a long time ago, didn't you? How much do you know about Droll's daughter?" "I cannot really say that I know too much about her either. As your majesty knows, Droll rarely brought his daughter before the public in the past. It was more as though he was worried that his retribution would fall upon his daughter. Then how credible are the rumors that he dotes excessively on his daughter? That is not a rumor, but a fact. Because when his daughter was born, I saw the expression on Droll's face with my own eyes. At that very moment, I realized that even that heinously evil man could reveal such an expression. No matter how the king thought about it, it all felt strange. Since he loved his daughter so much, how could he leave her by my side?" Then the king came before the Empress. After going once to Droll's territory, the Empress's expression had indeed become somewhat more relaxed. "If you want to go, you may also go back once in a while in the future, but I hope that next time, you will not cut your hand with a knife again." I know that the Empress must have had her own reasons for doing so.